Chapter 252. What happened? Luo Nan's mental senses chased after An Wang, observing the logic world with his clairvoyance. He understood some of the changes in the situation, but he only understood half of them. By the time the giant cocoon of light appeared, he vaguely knew that he had reached the most crucial stage. However, he was limited by his level of understanding. His thoughts were stuck here, and it was hard for him to continue. He could only continuously increase the precision of his senses and observe seriously. Even though this consumed 10 to 100 times more mental energy than the life sketches he had just comprehended, he felt that it was necessary. At this time, an indescribable light shone out from the projection of the scales of truth. One could not see anything by just sensing it, but under this light, the black and white plates of the scales of truth instantly lost their color. Black was no longer black, and white was no longer white. It was as if some crucial element had been extracted. It was as if they had been dyed together. Indistinguishable. It was this indescribable light that soundlessly opened up a region within the shadow pillar. Its appearance was similar to the cocoon of light that the first ablatums constructed the evolution field. It was just that it was 10 times larger. The projection of the scales of truth resided in the center of the cocoon of light. Light and shadow interweaved, forming countless lines of varying thickness. At first glance, they looked like branches that were spreading out. They grew endlessly, and some even wrapped around the two plates. The young branches spiraled and pierced into the projection above. It didn't matter if it was the human-faced arachnid, the kite shield, or the format pyramid. Because of this, the three projection diagrams underwent changes at the same time. Light and shadow warped slightly, and their structures melted. Holy space, extraordinary substitution. Ouyang Chen's body was covered in layers of ripples, offsetting the resistance of the shadow pillar. He approached the cocoon of light step by step. The front of the ripples had already made contact with the cocoon of light, undulating and rippling. Although his progress was not slow, he still frowned when he saw the cocoon of light form and the ripples transform. You've gone from a small substitution of worldly objects to a large substitution of the extraordinary domain. An Wang, your moves are truly extraordinary. However, has your first ablatum allowed you to borrow the power of the scales of truth? There was no response from within the cocoon of light, but Luo Nan's heart inexplicably palpitated. Substitution? He understood a bit. At this moment, the two ends of the scales, the human-faced arachnid, him and Fairchild, were they exchanging places? No, it wasn't. After all, the two altar frameworks were still entangled. An Wang had placed Luo Nan on the scales of truth, so the two frameworks were destined to form a close connection. Luo Nan could roughly sense that the two ends of the scale had merely blurred the boundary between chaos and order. There was no relationship of substitution between the two. It was more like a sort of blending. Together, they formed a sort of indescribable existence, and they used this as a foundation to grow and strengthen without end. As for the replacement, it happened on an even more mysterious level, and he had no idea what it was at the moment. But the human-faced arachnid, Fairchild, and Luo Nan were all unavoidably affected by the exchange. They were all greatly affected. The rooftop of Building A had already collapsed. Amid the dust and debris, Fairchild raised his hands and stared at it. He watched as the flowing mercury light dimmed layer by layer, his face expressionless. Luo Nan swept his eyes over this scene. He was slightly startled, and his heart suddenly throbbed. Not good. Even Child was in trouble, let alone him? Something was definitely going to happen on the main body's side. The melting of the format pyramid structure on the scales of truth was an ominous sign. Hiss! Luo Nan's mind returned to his main body, and he drew in a breath of cold air. He was cut in half. Ever since An Wang pulled him into the framework of the altar of the scales of truth, he had been unable to get rid of the feeling of restraint. Now, this feeling had intensified. His blood and energy were blocked and blocked, causing many parts of his body to feel numb. His control over his body had dropped substantially. In contrast, his internal organs, which lacked sensory nerves, seemed to have rebelled. The diffuse sensation of pain caused many of his internal organs to convulse. This caused Luo Nan's body to begin to tremble lightly. In the end, he even began to sway. On the AR interface, at least 7 or 8 diagrams simultaneously displayed the color of blood red, signifying danger. The whispers and conversations within the vehicle were swept clean in an instant. All that was left were the beeping sounds of the instrument's alarm, rising and falling, interweaving together. Internal organ dysfunction. Hold him up. Bai Xinyan's command rang out, but it soon faded away. This was because at this very moment, a lava-like heat poured down from the top of Luo Nan's head. His brain seemed to be boiling, and it was as if someone had given him a heavy punch. His mind was dizzy, and his consciousness was dazed. His mental senses lost their accuracy, and his clairvoyance became blurry and indistinct. His headquarters had actually been raided. Luo Nan did his best to calm his mind, hoping to recover his clarity of mind. But even though his thoughts were a mess, he knew that Wang had certainly used the scales of truth and the enormous cocoon of light that had just been erected. That old fellow had really struck Luo Nan's weak spot in an instant. This wouldn't do. Luo Nan felt the incorporeal net on his body rapidly tighten. It had already bound his body tightly, and it traced all the way up. It wanted to completely seal off all of the transformations of his body and soul. When that happened, he would truly be waiting for death. The unforeseen event happened too suddenly. Luo Nan had no time to consider anything else. Before the incorporeal net was about to close, Luo Nan completely obeyed his instincts. He visualized the formatting pagoda and commanded the wraith sign to exert force. Amidst the trembling of the chains, Luo Nan's soul left his body and ascended. He took a step into the depths of the mental plane. The incorporeal net closed, but it was a step too late. In the instant his soul left his body, Luo Nan could clearly hear the snapping sounds of tree branches snapping. There was also quite a bit of resistance present. Fortunately, his method of leaving his body was to borrow external force. It was close to being rough, directly charging into the depths of the mental plane. Otherwise, he might not have been able to succeed in one go. As for now, Luo Nan's mind suddenly became clear after his body and soul separated. His mental senses stabilized once more. The most miraculous thing was that the feeling of pain in his main body instantly disappeared by quite a bit. Yes, and Wang had used the blessing of the shield of truth to make an issue out of it. Luo Nan had forcibly left his body, breaking the mode of interference between the mental and the material. Naturally, he had broken free of the shackles. He was no longer restricted by them. It was just that nothing could ever be perfect. Though he had dodged a calamity, he had lost control of his main body. Before he could lay down, he fell backward and directly fell into Zhang Yingying's embrace. He lost all sensation. The carriage was in a flurry of activity. The situation looked as if Luo Nan was about to breathe his last in the blink of an eye. Luo Nan could not care about what would happen to his main body next. Though he had broken Wang's plan, it was still impossible for him to completely break free from this vortex. As long as the conflict between the altar frame and the scales of truth and the formatting pagoda were still entangled, it was impossible for him to truly remain uninvolved. Right now, the results of Luo Nan's escape were directly reflected on the projection of the scales of truth within the so-called holy space. The formatting pagoda still existed, but it had faded quite a bit. More importantly, the state of warping and melting had reversed, returning it to a complete state. This change was neither too big nor too small, but it directly disturbed the balanced state of fusion between chaos and order. The growth of the branches within the cocoon of light came to a halt. Some of them even withered in an instant. Chapter 253. Aya! Zhang Xiao could not help but sigh. Those who were still paying attention to the cocoon of light, the changes in the holy space, were all people with discerning eyes. The minute changes inside could not be hidden from anyone. He knew that Wang had not tricked him lightly, but they were of the same order, so he unconsciously leaned to the side. He was a clear-sworn first ablatum. He was familiar with the classics and knew how valuable the holy space, represented by the cocoon of light, was. When they had set up the evolution field, the external magic arrays were similar in shape. However, upon closer inspection, they were merely mechanical imitations. The current holy space was a domain formed by the holy object after achieving an exquisite balance. When the holy space was set up, the objects that achieved balance, whether it was chaos or order, would become sacrifices for the exchange. They would become the stepping stones to the extraordinary domain. This was the true path to the heavens of the one-step extraordinary. The order of justice viewed the holy space as the mother of the Holy Spirit. As long as the sacrifices on the scales of truth could make up for the consumption, even an extraordinary could be born from nothing. At the very least, Every generation of first Ablatums had achieved this through the great exchange of the holy space. They represented the blessing and supreme authority of the holy object. It was by relying on this inconceivable power that the Order of Justice was able to maintain a steady increase in the number of high-level experts for the past 40 years. They were able to spread their teachings to the entire world and become one of the three great secret orders. Zhang Xiao pondered. And Wang's fleshly body was completely destroyed. There was a 70 to 80% chance that he would use this technique to reconstruct his fleshly body, the so-called Holy Spirit body. This was also the most common use of the Great Exchange. 09 small, say, net. If he succeeded, the Order of Justice would gain another extraordinary. Although the price he paid tonight was disastrous, it was still worth it. However, there was a flaw now. There was a problem at the root. Even if the body was successfully reconstructed, the so-called extraordinary could no longer be mentioned. It was a huge loss. The withering of the branches continued. Even though a considerable portion was growing to make up for the gap, the phenomenon of withering and flourishing could not be eliminated in a short period of time. What was even more fatal was that with this delay, Ouyang Chen had already broken through the final obstruction of the shadow pillar. He stood outside the cocoon of light, within reach. Although the holy space had endless wondrous uses, it was never a sturdy barrier. No matter what, it could not withstand the attack of an extraordinary. Zhang Xiao closed his eyes and let out a long sigh. "And Wang, are you there?" A strange greeting suddenly sounded. Zhang Xiao opened his eyes in astonishment. He saw Ouyang Chen standing outside the cocoon of light. He stretched out his hand and lightly knocked on the cocoon's outer shell, as if he was a guest who had come to pay a visit. He was polite and courteous. Although the sound was a bit loud, it could still be clearly heard hundreds of meters away. The cocoon of light was silent. There was no response. Seeing this, Ouyang Chen muttered to himself for a while. Then, he increased the strength of his fingers and pressed against the outer layer of the light cocoon. With the increase in strength, the outer shell of the light cocoon clearly sank, and the texture became obvious. It looked like a raw egg that had been peeled off and left with its membrane. It was translucent and could be pierced by a finger at any time. In the end, the holy space was not a raw egg. Under the influence of external stimuli, its feedback exceeded everyone's expectations. The cocoon of light was cramping like a living thing, like an enormous heart. The branches and veins inside broke out of the wall and spread out. The shadows, which had already faded away, gathered from the periphery. They came into contact with the veins, and it was as if they had been injected with fresh blood. They came alive in an instant, layer upon layer, pouncing over to cover the cocoon of light, causing it to retreat into the depths of the shadows. At the same time, the logic world rumbled and shook. The enormous shadow pillar that had been smashed into the ground was uprooted and contracted upwards. Dark clouds and turbid mists surged like waves, assaulting one's face and causing one's heart to feel stifled. Like this. Zhang Xiao was a bit stunned, and a thought fiercely came to mind. Wrong. This isn't the forging of the Holy Spirit body at all. He's repeating his previous actions. He wants to control. Just like controlling the human-faced arachnid, and one clearly wanted to use the power of the enormous shadow pillar and even the demon behind the scenes as a vessel for his soul to reside in. He wanted to achieve complete control. However, the consequences of Luo Nan's escape were showing themselves. The sound of thunder exploded. It was the roar of the demon behind the shadow pillar. Luo Nan did not reverse in Wang's direction, but the instantaneous change he created reduced the upper limits of Wang's control. The enormous shadow pillar was uprooted halfway and cracked apart with a hum. Dark shadow clouds pervaded everywhere, flooding the entire logic world. No one could dodge them. What was the difference between this and receiving an attack from a demon? Zheng Zhao's face turned green. He summoned his last bit of strength to instantly cast an incantation, erecting a transparent barrier around his body. He blocked the first wave of the shadow cloud's corrosion. However, not everyone was as lucky as him. The priests and knights of the order were enveloped by the black mist. It was as if they had been corroded by poisonous flames. Dark flames instantly ignited, and they were burned to ashes in a few breaths of time. These people had died unjustly, but they had fainted from the impact. After all, they did not suffer any pain. The ones who suffered the most were the Ablatum Knights. The corrosive attack of the shadow cloud was one thing, but what they faced was no longer an external threat. Instead, it was the shackles that had taken root in the depths of their bodies and souls over the years. They were the vessels for the magical power of the first ablatums. This was also the source of their power. Right now, Wang's power was being channeled through this channel, giving them a boost. A boost that was completely out of control. The power of the demons' rampage far surpassed the limits of what they could endure. Muffled explosions rang out in the corner of the building. Foul blood blossomed. Several ablatum knights exploded one after another. At this point, the elite forces of the Order of Justice in Xia City were practically wiped out. 6 muffled explosions rang out in a row. Baze, who was just about to climb up to the rooftop, suddenly froze. His powerful body suddenly swelled up. His bones and muscles creaked and groaned. Just like that, he staggered up to the ruins of the rooftop that had already collapsed. It looked as if he would explode at any moment, but in the end, his powerful talent and the toughness of his fleshly body far surpassed that of the other ablatum knights. Baze opened his mouth with great effort. His originally snow-white teeth were already soaked in blood. He roared with a hoarse voice. Fairchild! Fairchild, who was standing on the other side of the building, turned around when he heard the roar. Baze's eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. He was already in a half-blind state, but he was still able to miraculously lock onto Fairchild's position. He roared once more and charged up. Baze only needed 2 steps to traverse a distance of several dozen meters. He smashed out with his fist. The already dim mercury-like radiance sputtered. The shield of truth was broken in one strike, and Fairchild's majestic body was blasted into the air. Baze chased after Fairchild at an even faster speed, bombarding him with a series of heavy punches. Die! 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 Baze's roar was devoid of any killing intent. It was just a venting of extreme pain. In the end, he simply tore apart all pretenses. Kill me! Kill me! Kill me! Kill me! Come and kill me! The twisting tendons were like living snakes. They wandered around Baze's body, giving him absolute power. But at the same time, pain and despair were branded within. Chapter 254. Child did not say a word. He was purely defending. At this time, his shield of truth had been broken, and he no longer had the almost absolute defense ability. Baze, who had been forced to break through his limits, had fists that were sharper and more terrifying than any axe, hammer, or knife. They constantly tore apart Child's robe and flesh, bringing with them a thin layer of blood mist. Even so, Child was not knocked down by Baze. Even if the power of chaos continued to attack and erode him, there was still a fundamental order that always existed. No physical structure could compare to it. Baze punched again, forcibly blasting away Child's raised arm. The force of the punch penetrated Child's chest and into his lungs, crushing Child's chest until it visibly caved in. Child did not dodge. He used a handbind and locked Baze's joints. The two of them instantly entered a more dangerous close combat. First, 2 heads collided with each other. In an instant, both sides were covered in blood. This collision also forced Baze's ferocious teeth back. Child was still holding onto Baze's elbow joint. Borrowing the force of the other party's charge and retreat, he pulled outwards, forcibly twisting Baze up and smashing him heavily into the rubble. But then, he was also knocked over by the brute force of Baze. The strength of the 2 humanoid beasts was terrifying. Under the force of the collision, the floor under the rubble could no longer withstand it. Even the steel frame collapsed with a loud bang. The 2 of them fell together, and their heads and faces were covered by the rubble above. But even so, in the narrowest space, they did not stop. Instead, they continuously hit each other's face, chest, and waist. The colliding shock waves swept away the rubble, avoiding the result of being buried. But before they landed on the ground, both of them were already vomiting blood. No matter how injured he was, Child remained as cold as iron. The opportunity he had been waiting for finally arrived after Baze's 2 unreserved waves of attacks. At the cost of another heavy elbow strike on his chest, he took advantage of the gap left by Baze's overexertion and performed a joint technique, forcefully twisting Baze's left elbow joint. Then, he took a heavy hit on his head and broke Baze's right shoulder. At this point, both of Baze's arms were broken. But even so, Baze was like a mad tiger. Ignoring his shattered shoulder and dislocated joints, he stood up and continued to fight. However, His rapidly declining athletic ability was no longer enough to support this kind of fighting style. Fairchild pulled away and delivered a series of combination punches, hitting Baze's chin, ears, and other vital points, concussing his brain and causing him to lose consciousness. Finally, Fairchild kicked Baze's lower abdomen, temporarily dispersing the inner chi he had lost control of. Boom! Baze was sent flying and smashed into a distorted pillar. A large amount of earth and rocks fell down and covered his body. In the end, he struggled to get up, but he still roared and screamed. Pure chaos and ruthlessness tormented the strongest man in Xia City to the point where he was neither human nor ghost. Fairchild panted slightly. As soon as he adjusted his breathing, he said, "Help!" His voice was low, and it did not travel far. When he spoke, the area within a 20-meter radius around him was filled with dark clouds. Aside from the struggling Baze, there was no one alive. However, a mere 2 seconds after his voice fell, Fairchild's chest glowed with a faint light. The tetrahedron format pyramid was half embedded in the juncture between his chest and abdomen. It helped him adjust his energy and blood, alleviating his injuries. Fairchild extended his hand and adjusted his broken ribs. Some of them had already pierced into his internal organs, causing him to bleed. But as a powerful being who was only a step away from becoming an extraordinary, such injuries were far from fatal. After the broken ribs were pulled out and reset, the self-repair function of his internal organs began to display its effect. He retained at least 50 to 60% of his combat strength. Of course, the standard of comparison was in a state without the support of the Shield of Truth. "There's still him." Fairchild extended his hand and pointed at Baze. "Are you sure?" Luo Nan's consciousness cut in from the mental plane. Fairchild had contacted Luo Nan through the order imprint that Luo Nan had projected earlier. This also showed that Luo Nan's existence in the logic world was no secret to a powerful being like Fairchild. "He can still be saved," Fairchild replied calmly. "I feel that you can do it." "All right." With just a few words, all the pressure had been thrown onto Luo Nan's body. Of course, Fairchild knew that he was not answering Luo Nan's question. He explained, "Aside from Wang, the Order of Order has some prospects in Xia City. He and Zhang Xiao. You need to preserve some of your vitality." Well, Luo Nan had nearly forgotten that Fairchild was a member of the Order of Justice. Even though he was an executioner of the truth side who was as incompatible as fire and water with the secular side, he was also a fanatical believer of the Order of Justice. It was hard to fathom Fairchild's current feelings in a situation where the Order of Justice had suffered such disastrous casualties. But thinking about it, Fairchild was far from being happy. As for Wang, Luo Nan did not finish his sentence, but his meaning was very clear. Was this the time to consider preserving some of his vitality? The giant shadow pillar was rising endlessly. And Wang's plans and methods were already as clear as day. The demon behind the scenes was far too powerful. If Wang could truly create a miracle and use the scales of truth and the holy space to control the demon in one fell swoop, then the people of the logic world would probably be purged once more. "You're thinking too much," Fairchild responded simply. "It's not your turn to interfere in a battle between extraordinaries." This was the standard truth, leaving Luo Nan speechless. He sighed soundlessly and no longer spoke nonsense. He gave Baze the support of the format pyramid. Compared to Fairchild's immediate effect, Baze's situation was not going smoothly. Right now, the inside of the black man's body was a mess. External and internal injuries were secondary. What was truly troublesome was the chaos element that had been forcefully poured into his body. This was a crude replacement. It was as if the chaos essence of the human-faced arachnid had been forcefully stuffed in, replacing all the functions of a human body. The fact that Baze's body did not explode on the spot only proved that Baze's body was tough to an inconceivable degree. It was useless to know the cause of the disease. Baze's chaotic essence had already fused deeply with Baze's after the previous frenzied assault. It was like a cup of water that had been soaked in ink. No matter how clear it was impossible for it to return to its original state. What's more, the amount of ink was greater than the cup of water itself. This was probably what it meant when the disease was beyond cure. Luo Nan switched to clairvoyance mode. He was no longer able to draw out Baze's constellation diagram if he used the life sketch method to observe. He could only draw something closer to the human-faced arachnid's dark clouds and shadows. In a certain sense, the current Baze could no longer be called a human. The chaotic essence of a demon had already deeply replaced Bei's original functions. This person should have died long ago, but he was still alive. Bei's powerful fleshly body and his crumbling internal foundation were mixed together to form this extremely special case. Chapter 255. Luo Nan's mental senses swept Bei's inside out. The more he looked, the greater the pressure. The more he looked, the more he did not know what to do. For a time, his mind was filled with resentment toward Wang. That Wang. He didn't want to be a person, but he also conveniently tricked his own subordinate. Fine. Wang did not care about this at all. He was wholeheartedly working on the demon behind the shadows. You can save him. Fairchild repeated similar words. His confidence far exceeded Luo Nan's. How can I save him? Luo Nan did not need to pretend to communicate with Fairchild. He responded in a bad mood. His heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys are all unreliable. All of his functions are in chaos. They are all for the sake of accumulating the most explosive power. The verbal information suddenly stopped here. The efficiency of the exchange of information on the mental plane far exceeded that of a regular conversation. Fairchild understood Luo Nan's confusion and difficulties. Luo Nan also roughly understood Fairchild's train of thought. He even used more concise and accurate words to express himself. Build an order frame for him and restrain him? Just like that. Fairchild's train of thought was only a general idea. It originated from the feeling of order he received on the mental plane back at Frost River Reality. Now that Luo Nan had added the finishing touch, Fairchild immediately praised, order frame. This description is very good. Of course it was good. Right now, Wang was doing this. Yes, there was also Luo Nan himself. Through the conflict with Wang on the altar frame, Luo Nan gained a new understanding of many things that were previously fuzzy and unclear. Altar and sacrificial offering represented a kind of order. The essence of demons was indeed chaos, but it was chaos that was controlled by a certain order. There needed to be a large frame above the chaos. Otherwise, it would be chaos that was completely meaningless. The human-faced arachnid was the best example. The Wraith Sign's many successful sacrificial offerings proved that this kind of chaotic existence could be accommodated within a high level of order. This was the only way to explain how a dark side a life form, which acted completely by instinct, could use efficient methods to make correct choices most of the time. The current Bei's was a humanoid demon. Although it was a bit nondescript, there was no difference in essence. It would naturally be extremely difficult to make him return to his human state. However, it seemed feasible to just maintain it. Or even take it a step further. Luo Nan pondered for a moment before saying, if you don't mind this state, you might be able to preserve your life. But this will completely change the foundation. Is there any meaning to it? Fairchild shook his head slightly. He looked down at Bei's, who was panting violently. The man's features were twisted from the pain, and his black face was stained with dirt and blood. Even his mouth was no exception. He looked as ferocious as a ghost. Sensing Fairchild's gaze, Bei's half-protruding eyes met Fairchild's. However, his pupils were dilated and no longer focused, making him look even more terrifying. The skin that bore this terrifying and hideous face was rapidly turning gray. The strength of its struggle was getting weaker and weaker, and it was also getting stiffer and stiffer. It looked like the last bit of its life could be extinguished at any time. For living beings, the essence of chaos was infinitely equal to death. On the other hand, if there was life, then its essence might not be pure chaos. There was always a glimmer of hope. Make your move, Fairchild replied. Luo Nan didn't say anything more. The radiance of the format pyramid grew brighter and brighter at Bei's chest. This represented that Luo Nan's order was affecting Bei's. However, a simple blessing from the format pyramid was not enough. He still needed a more direct and efficient method. Luo Nan needed some reference, but his consciousness had just walked around the altar frame. Information that came from the depths of the mental plane caused his consciousness to deviate a bit. He was a bit distracted. And Wang's control over the demon behind the scenes seemed to have reached a new level. Ouyang Chen had already been completely driven out of the giant shadow pillar. Ouyang Chen was speeding up his departure from the logic world. Focus! Fairchild warned him. His meaning was clear. Don't touch what you shouldn't touch. Don't force yourself. Luo Nan understood Fairchild's meaning. However, The altar frame was entangled on a level like this. It was not something he could do even if he wanted to stay out of it. In reality, as Luo Nan exerted his influence on Bei's, his entanglement with Wang floated to the surface once more. Wang did not pay attention to Bei's, but Luo Nan had constructed an order frame to deal with the essence of chaos. It was a part of the demon that Wang had just stripped off. As a result, Luo Nan's level of tracing back inevitably came into contact with Wang's scales of truth frame. The hidden connection was instantly highlighted. Wang and Luo Nan met once more. This was not a happy meeting. Instead, it was a collision, conflict, and pursuit between two order frames on a higher level. Oh, there was also President Ouyang Chen. His mental senses had come to join in on the fun. This was the first time Luo Nan clearly sensed the existence of this president, but it soon blurred away. The reason was that he was quite far away. It was like a diving competition. Luo Nan and Wang both had clear directions to reach their destination. Ouyang Chen's diving depth was certainly not inferior to theirs, but he was unfamiliar with the underwater environment. He spent too much energy searching for his target, and he was left far behind by the cheating duo. In the end, Ouyang Chen simply got lost. There was no need to talk about anything else. It was precisely because Ouyang Chen was left behind that Wang shifted most of the energy he had placed on Ouyang Chen to Luo Nan. He scanned Luo Nan over and over again, paying extreme attention. Wang could not be blamed for doing this. Right now, the holy space was deep within the giant shadow pillar. It was attempting to control the demon, but it was not completely successful. Luo Nan traced it back through the chaos element on Bei's body. They occupied different sizes, inside and outside, but their levels were the same. Then the problem came: 2 frames, 2 elements, 2 directions. There was only one demon behind the scenes. Who did it listen to? It didn't want to listen to anyone. A restless roar penetrated through countless curtains into the logic world. The berserk power urged the dark clouds of shadow. The vortex seemed to have substance, corroding and tearing apart everything it covered. Dust filled the sky, and the 3 buildings swayed even more violently. Such a reaction allowed Luo Nan to confirm one step further. Perhaps the demon behind the scenes was thousands of times more powerful than the human-faced arachnid, but they were essentially the same goods. This fellow's reaction was practically the same as the burning wraith on the warship a dozen or so days ago, the previous incarnation of the wraith sign. They were both helpless when faced with this situation. The powerful instincts nurtured within their chaos could only be accomplished under a higher plane of order frame. Once this order frame encountered an attack, it would be more delightful to be captured without putting up a fight. Right now, Wang was pursuing the specific hierarchical structure of this order frame. He was simulating and overlapping in order to realize control over the demon. Wang had a clear direction. This was probably a hint given to him by the holy space. But Luo Nan had one as well. Chapter 256. A soft trembling sound rang through the void. With the human-faced arachnid as a living example, it was hard for Luo Nan not to associate it with the heavily chained crow. Over 10 days ago, Luo Nan had truly constructed the format and entered the level of "my heart's a prison." The speed of Luo Nan's progress was inconceivable even to Luo Nan. But he knew very well that up until now, the embodiment of his greatest ability was still the format pyramid and the heavily chained crow. This was the precious treasure left to him by his grandfather. Everything was born from this. Luo Nan was still unable to completely understand the mysteries within even to this day. He could only say that he had comprehended some basic principles. That was a frame. From the changes in the altar frame, it could be seen that the so-called dark chains were very much like the materialization of some high-level order frame. Luo Nan was unable to understand how his grandfather was able to assimilate this order frame into medicine, breathing, and visualization. It was branded onto the body of a cultivator, allowing them to grasp this high-level technique. But the most important thing right now was still the application. Luo Nan pondered to himself that the directivity of his heavily chained crow was not much inferior to Wang's. It seemed that the crow was able to follow Luo Nan down a distance. But what was the point of doing that? By Xinyan and the others' mockery, Fairchild's warning at the same time, and all the previous lessons. Had he not suffered enough? Without thinking any further, the dark chains materialized and pierced through the void, piercing through Bei's head. This wasn't the first time Luo Nan had used the heavily chained crow on a living person, but this was certainly the first time he had a clear goal of order. Luo Nan did not understand or pay attention to the specific circulation of blood energy. His attention was completely focused on the effect of the order frame on the nature of chaos. To say that it was useful was an overestimation for him. Luo Nan had never been an expert in interfering with the material plane. Now, the direction of his development had begun to shift towards pure observation. To a large extent, he had given up on interacting with the material plane in exchange for outstanding performance in mental sensing. It was impossible for Luo Nan to turn Baze into a marionette. It was also impossible for Luo Nan to forcefully turn Baze onto a new orbit of order. All he did was guide Baze to see through the chaos mist and the higher-level new order that was eroded by the chaos elements. With this, he could sort out the structure of Baze's body and soul and alleviate the damage caused by the chaos element's erosion. The problem was that Baze had already lost his basic control. Even if there was a clear answer in front of him, it would be difficult for him to follow up. Luo Nan had long since anticipated this. This was the final fork in the road. Luo Nan gave Fairchild one last reminder. "This is my order frame. Mine." But Luo Nan did not say anything. However, he did not say a word. He half knelt down and punched Baze in the chest. Baze spat out a mouthful of blood, which splattered all over Child's face. The latter was unfazed and threw another punch. However, at this time, Baze, who was paralyzed on the ground, straightened his upper body and used his chest to block Fairchild's fist halfway. At this moment their eyes met. Fairchild raised his chin slightly. "If you want to live, follow me." Baze gasped for air. The pain caused by the corrosion and symbiosis of the chaotic elements was still ongoing. Inside and outside of his body, every blood vessel was twisting, and every muscle was twitching. In the midst of chaos, the human body's habitual functions and order had long since changed beyond recognition, and there was no possibility of recovery. Chaos. World. Nan. To say to the human body. And the human body function. And this was something that he was unable to accomplish in a short amount of time. And Luo Nan was currently demonstrating a certain possibility for him. Baze could only comply. He had no other choice. Baze closed his eyes. His breathing became hurried and chaotic. Then, it suddenly stopped. A few seconds later, it resumed, and the cycle repeated. At the same time, the muscles, bones, blood vessels, and internal organs of his body squirmed crazily. They matched the rhythm of his breathing. After repeating it 5 times, which meant that he had failed 5 times, Baze suddenly let out a wild roar. The back of his head slammed against the floor of the ruins. His body twitched violently, and his blood vessels bulged all over his skin, forming an ugly and ferocious image. Time passed second by second. The dark clouds and turbid mist stirred by the giant shadow pillar corroded layer after layer of the building. Parts of the building collapsed from time to time. The skyscraper was on the verge of collapse. A portion of the dark clouds and turbid mist came over. Of course, they could not harm Fair. They could do nothing to Luo Nan, but they were inexplicably attracted to the roaring Baze. They went in and out of his mouth and nose. It was as if they were making some sort of exchange. Fair was unmoved. He watched all of this in silence. Hiss! A long breath rang out. Baze suddenly exerted his strength. In a short 2 seconds, he actually sucked in all the mist around his body. His painfully struggling body swelled slightly. Then it suddenly froze, and he collapsed back onto the floor. He gasped for breath. His chest rose and fell clearly, but his breathing had already entered the range of that of a normal person. This meant that Baze had found a new order of life amidst the chaos and disorder. However, this might not be a satisfactory ending for Baze. Baze opened his eyes. His ice-cold eyes pointed at the night sky, unfocused. His malevolent aura was like a flame beneath a layer of ice. It was weak but tenacious. Luo Nan knew that this brother's gaze was directed at him. But what could he do? An interesting change appeared in the structure of the pyramid. Baze's figure silently appeared on the staff level. This was the result of Baze reconstructing the structure of his body and soul in accordance to the established order with the help of the heavily chained crow. Luo Nan had already explained this to Fair in advance. Fair tacitly agreed, but Baze might not be completely convinced. Fine, Baze would definitely reject Baze. Luo Nan did not have many examples of what sort of restrictions one would have to endure as a member of the format pyramid. The comparison was not strong. Wraithsign, who was on the skill level, was very obedient. Cat Eyes, who was on the student level, was very unruly. As for Baze, who was on the staff level, the heavily chained crow suddenly trembled violently. Baze's body fiercely twitched amidst the rattling vibrations. Deep within the structure of his body and soul, a hook that had long since been warped and deformed shattered. In an instant, an obscure fluctuation penetrated through the air. Luo Nan was startled and shocked. He cried out in his mind, but before he could react, and Wang's telepathic thoughts were like a long sword drawn from a furnace. They sliced through the air, bringing with them an intense burning pain. That hook was certainly the method Wang used to control ablatum knights like Baze. Even though Baze had been abandoned by Wang, it was hard to avoid alarming Wang when this sort of change occurred. However, the reason for Wang's intense reaction was not as simple as losing Baze. Luo Nan had realized his control over Baze. He had erected a restraining order on top of Baze's chaotic essence. In a certain sense, this was tantamount to controlling a portion of the power of the demon behind the scenes, even if it was a portion that had been abandoned. This was just like Wang trying to control a continent. He had turned the sky and earth upside down, but he had yet to obtain any results. But Luo Nan, who was next to Wang, had first taken control of a small island that had separated from the main body of the continent due to a volcanic earthquake. This was probably what it felt like. Metaphors could describe reality, but in the end, they could not replace reality. Luo Nan and Wang did not have the relationship of an island and a continent. There was no vast ocean between them. There was only an indescribable distance of sensing. It was too dangerous. If Luo Nan was Wang, he would probably think the same. Plus, there was another element that seeped in. Chapter 257. Luo Nan was used to hearing the sound of the heavily chained crow trembling. Of course that was to himself. How could there be any sound on the mental plane? All there was the corresponding energy and information. In the past, the heavily chained crow spent most of its time hidden in the deepest depths of the mental plane. It was only known to outsiders for a limited period of time. But right now, Wang's depth on the mental plane was not inferior to Luo Nan's. He could clearly sense the relevant energy and information. Yes, Wang had certainly heard it. There was Baze in front, and there was vibrations behind. It was unknown how Wang understood this series of changes. But it was certain that Wang was paying close attention to this. He even temporarily stopped controlling the demon. The heart of the cocoon of light in the holy space was shockingly quiet at this moment. All movements had stopped. Correspondingly, Wang's telepathic thoughts chopped toward Luo Nan once more. Even Child next to him could feel the scorching sensation of the red-hot long sword, let alone Luo Nan himself. Withdraw your senses. Don't provoke him. Child's judgment made Luo Nan speechless. But soon, Child realized his mistake. He furrowed his brows and cast his gaze in the direction of the giant shadow pillar. Wang's movements were unfathomable. As for the demon, it was admittedly quite manic, but the chaotic energy and information it brought could be viewed as background noise. It could be easily filtered out. Because of this, the energy and information in this warped deep space instantly became much more refreshing. For a time, all that was left was the faint sound of the heavily chained crow. It grew clearer and clearer, louder and louder. Luo Nan felt a bit of pressure in his heart. He discovered that the source of the energy and information that resonated with the chains did not seem to be him alone. The shaking of the heavily chained crow gave rise to echoes in this warped deep space. The transmission of energy and information was certainly not in the form of sound waves. It was far too indiscernible. If one really wanted to find the source, one could only analyze it layer by layer to search for clues and determine the direction. Presumably, Wang had discovered this point, which was why he stopped his actions to reduce the interference. But no matter how much interference there was, it was too difficult for Luo Nan. His analytical ability was far from this level, so he was at a loss for a time. Hold on. Idiot! Luo Nan cursed to himself. His brain had become stiff from the series of unforeseen events. Actually, he didn't need to go through all this trouble. The crucial information could be completely seen from the heavily chained crow. His attention returned to the heavily chained crow. In just a few short seconds, a string in his heart was forcefully plucked. The judgment of the so-called echo just now was torn apart. The sound in the deep space was not an echo, but a resonance. Using this concept of physics, the current state of the heavily chained crow could be described as being at the same frequency as something else. One side affected the other side, and the other side affected the other side. The originally minuscule amplitude suddenly expanded. Of course, it made it impossible for the heavily chained crow to hide, but it also made an even more obscure existence in the depths of space appear. Hualala! Roar! The second half was the roar of a demon. Ever since the sound of the chains reverberated on this plane, this powerful demon had become extremely irritable. The power that was about to withdraw from the logic world swept out as a form of venting. The high floors of the building collapsed one after another wherever it passed. Rubble flew everywhere. Spectators like Fairchild, Baze, and Zhang Xiao had to dodge in a hurry to avoid being caught in the crossfire. Of course, the demon's attack involved the mental plane. The corresponding sweep was extremely powerful. If it was possible, it would certainly crush the few little fleas inside and outside of its own domain to death. Then it would chew and swallow them. However, it was not easy to accomplish this. The current Luo Nan was no longer the fledgling who would tremble with fear when facing the human-faced arachnid siege hammer. Right now, his sensing method of pure observation manifested a marvelous advantage. This completely effortless method allowed Luo Nan's mental senses to melt into the air. It was formless and incorporeal, but it was everywhere. Under the storm-like mental attack, Luo Nan's mental senses might distort for a moment, but the recoil force he received was extremely small. It didn't even hurt or itch. Under these circumstances, it did not matter whether the buildings of the logic world survived or not. To put it bluntly, it was nothing more than a silhouette that intervened between the void and reality. The limit of the logic world's endurance was the major problem. As the demon's power continued to bombard the world, a clear tremor appeared in the night sky. Corresponding ripples appeared frequently, warping and turbulent. The world was on the verge of collapse. Fairchild and Baze were both nimble people when the skyscraper collapsed. It was hard for them to be affected by their injuries, so it was easy for them to dodge the attack. However, Fairchild's expression changed a bit when he saw the ripples in the void. Withdraw. Fairchild's words were directed at Luo Nan. He and Baze did not move. After the logic world was established, mental senses could not enter and exit. If a living person wanted to leave, they would need to obtain the permission of Ouyang Chen, the creator of the logic world, or they would need to forcefully break through the spatial barrier. The latter would undoubtedly shake the foundation of the logic world's existence and accelerate the collapse of the logic world. It was just like what the demon was doing. Under normal circumstances, all Fairchild needed to do was give Ouyang Chen a heads-up if he wanted to leave. However, it was unknown how much control Ouyang Chen had over the logic world right now. The degree of damage to the logic world had far exceeded the normal limits. It was like a scrapped machine. No matter how superior its performance was in the past, once a critical part of it was damaged, it would be extremely difficult to start it up again. This was something that Ouyang Chen would have found hard to imagine before he created it. As for Luo Nan, he did not respond to Fairchild's call. He did not retreat either. It was not that he did not want to listen. It was that he did not dare. Fairchild saw the limits of the material plane, but Luo Nan saw the even more chaotic mental plane. At the very least, the warped spatial structure could still be used on the material plane of the logic world. However, on the mental plane, various critical structures had already begun to collapse. One warped curtain after another locked to the material plane. They bounced and drifted in retaliation. They intertwined with each other, turning the mental plane, especially the deep regions, into a mess. Luo Nan really did not dare to rashly charge in. From the results of his clairvoyance, the stability of the logic world had suffered irreversible damage after the demon's attack. The curtain structure of the mental plane had completely degenerated into a labyrinth trap. It was like hundreds and thousands of tape measures had been stretched out and woven into bizarre loops. If a soul body were to enter and exit, a single mishap would cause him to be lost in the endless depths of space. Even if he came out alive, only the heavens knew where he would be thrown to. A few dozen kilometers or 100 kilometers was fine, but what if it was 1,000 kilometers or 10,000 kilometers? The bottom of the ocean? The boundless space. Chapter 258. In the warped deep space, the energy and information radiated by the deformed structure of the logic world. If forcefully analyzed, it would be equivalent to the sound of snapping. The situation on the mental plane grew more and more complicated. Luo Nan did not listen to Fairchild's suggestion and quickly left, but he intercepted the extension of his mental senses. He did not go deeper and attempted to retract it. It was only now that he realized that the demon's venting was actually an opportunity to escape. After the structure of the logic world collapsed, the plane it was on became a curtain that had already been unhooked. It was a rapidly retracted tape measure. It severed its connection with the logic world and headed into deep space. In this way, An Wang, who had been paying close attention to Luo Nan, had no choice but to make a choice. Actually, it was not really a choice. The heart of the cocoon of light attached to the foundation of the demon's power would certainly leave with it. The red-hot longsword style of attention was finally shifted away. Luo Nan's mind involuntarily relaxed, but he soon discovered that he had relaxed too early. The demon had left. And Wang had left. The familiar yet unfamiliar vibrating sound grew clearer and clearer. It caused the heavily chained crow to sway a bit more than it should have. The resonance continued. The heavily chained crow was affected by the distant information. Even though Luo Nan had deliberately distanced himself from the matter, the resonant pull still kept him on this plane. It hooked his consciousness and drew him closer. Luo Nan's mind was a bit absent-minded. The pulling connection had more or less injected some energy and information fragments. After being analyzed, they became blurry images. It was as if he was in a dream. Due to the disparity in his analytical abilities, Luo Nan was not sure what he saw. At this time, a vibration was transmitted to him on the mental plane. It was a message from Ouyang Chen. The president locked onto the position of the plane and chased after him. This was the first time Luo Nan personally experienced the mental senses of an extraordinary. There was no pressure at all. Only the purest of information was transmitted over. An effective division of labor is more important than working overtime. Ha! Before Luo Nan could truly understand what was going on, his mind was shaken. He felt an astonishing storm set off on the mental plane. A powerful force, coming from an unknown source, swept over with a rumble. The great wind blew, and the light swayed. The range and level it covered was extremely vast. The Star River scene drawn by Luo Nan instantly turned blurry. The sudden assault of the storm should have affected Luo Nan a step further, but Ouyang Chen's intent was here. An invisible protective wall was erected, blocking the follow-up attack. The problem was that under the influence of this, the mental plane, which was not peaceful in the first place, became even more chaotic. Curtains and tape measures flew everywhere. The specific location of the demon and An Wang was immediately drowned in the chaotic flow of information. It was difficult to grasp. This was a cover. Luo Nan immediately made a preliminary judgment. This sudden storm had come far too coincidentally. It was hard for one not to suspect the intentions behind it. Who did it? Did the Order of Justice still have hidden experts in Xia City? Guild Master. They should be here soon. Luo Nan's thoughts were completely known to Ouyang Chen through communication on the mental plane. Ouyang Chen didn't even have the basic fluctuations in his emotions. He gave Luo Nan an evaluation of the sudden change in the situation. Then he gave Luo Nan some background information. An Wang, the target he's trying to control, holds a very important secret. Many people and powers are interested in it. I think it's necessary for the association to seize the initiative. If we can lock onto that demon's position, that would be the best. Luo Nan was speechless. How could they lock onto it? The demon had destroyed the logic world, causing chaos. It was unknown where the mental storm came from. It was truly extraordinary to use it to cover the retreat. Even if it was Ouyang Chen, in a short amount of time. Another change occurred in the void before Luo Nan could finish his thought. Another force surged up. It was like a tall cliff that suddenly rose up. It suppressed the void, blocking the mental storm that filled the air in the distance. The chaotic situation on the mental plane inexplicably eased up quite a bit in this moment of absent-mindedness. This sort of suppressive ability to go from motion to stillness was much more brilliant than pure destruction. But for some reason, there was a feeling of danger as it suppressed here. It wasn't that it was unstable. Instead, there was an even more powerful and active essence within its majesty. Luo Nan had plenty of experience with mental senses, but this was the first time he had seen the spirit of, I am not the mountain comes and I will. In comparison, Fairchild was far too pure, and Ouyang Chen was calm and low-key from beginning to end. Their characteristics were not as distinct and unforgettable as this person. Who was this person? It looked like he was on their side. Why didn't he make a move when the situation was better just now? Luo Nan muttered to himself, but Ouyang Chen was not the least bit surprised. He just transmitted a new thought over. I was thrown too far just now. I don't have enough strength to lock onto the demon's position. I need you to help me confirm. Ouyang Chen magnanimously admitted that Luo Nan was more outstanding than him in terms of tracking and sensing on the mental plane. Ouyang Chen admitted it, but Luo Nan found it a bit hard to accept. I didn't lock onto it. The only thing Luo Nan could confirm right now was that the demon's position was in the extreme depths of the mental plane. The construction of the logic world distorted the curtain, causing it to approach the material plane. This gave the demon the opportunity to appear. Right now, the structure of the logic world had collapsed, and the curtain had returned to its original position. This was the time of upheaval, and they interacted with each other. It was simply like the scattered pages of a book dancing in the gale. The difficulty of finding the demon and Wang right now was equivalent to locking onto a page of a book and searching for a single stroke error amidst the densely packed words. Just thinking about this project made Luo Nan feel a chill run down his back. He didn't have a back to chill for the time being. Ouyang Chen was very clear about the difficulty of this matter. He had no intention of pressuring Luo Nan. A general direction is fine. You can combine it with this diagram. It was still pure information that cut in, but this time the amount was much greater. It made Luo Nan a bit dizzy. The information that seeped in was just as Ouyang Chen said. It was similar to an image, but it was far too complex. A one-way view and a three-dimensional diagram were no longer able to represent it. After the analysis was done, it was like Luo Nan was stuffed into an immersion device, allowing him to personally experience the complexity and richness of the image. This was the benefit of communicating on the mental plane. Luo Nan soon understood that this was the structural design diagram of the logic world. After combing out the general outline, Luo Nan felt at first glance that the structural model of the logic world was like a thick sponge cushion. It surrounded everything in all directions. There were 3 to 4 layers stacked inside and outside, and then they pressed down together from the outermost layer. Luo Nan could represent the material plane, while the sponge cushion represented the mental plane. The higher levels of the mental plane exerted forcefully distorting the overlapping layers of structure. This caused the extremely distant mental plane to tear apart the barrier in the middle, directly interfering with the material plane. That was probably how it was. Luo Nan finally understood the basic method of constructing the logic world. Of course, it was absolutely not easy to accomplish this. It was impossible to do without the power of an extraordinary. Plus, how many layers of sponge cushions? Was there a problem with the thickness? Luo Nan could sense that the mental plane was also a multi-layered structure, but the description of 1,000 layers of curtains should be more accurate. The deeper he went into the mental plane, the more intense this feeling became. Either the layers overlapped, or they floated here and there. Oh, it should be a simplified model. How could the difficulty of calculating the deformation of just 3 to 5 layers be the same as calculating the deformation of hundreds to thousands of layers? Even if Ouyang Chen could calculate it, Luo Nan probably wouldn't be able to receive it. Luo Nan found a reasonable explanation, and his mind calmed down quite a bit. Since he was going to start with this model, the slightest difference would lead to a deviation of 1,000 miles. There was no hope for precision. He thought for a bit and drew a circle with his mind on this image. This was the area he felt was the most suitable. With this circle, he felt that there were at least 100 curtains that needed to be sorted out and confirmed. If the target curtains just happened to flutter a bit during this period of time, wasting all his previous efforts would be the only outcome. After drawing the circle, Luo Nan felt more and more unreliable. However, Ouyang Chen was quite satisfied with Luo Nan's answer. The direction is very convincing. We can give it a try. If it doesn't work, then we can study it again. But just as the thought arose, the turbulence on the mental plane, which had already subsided somewhat, suddenly became intense once more. The one who had provided cover for Wang had repeatedly attacked the suppression cliff to no avail. He switched to a different method. He began to jump back and forth in various areas of the mental plane. Sometimes, he even touched upon the material plane. He stirred the clouds and gave rise to waves. He directly affected the existence of the logic world. Everyone could see that the complete collapse of the logic world was only a matter of time. Ouyang Chen did not say anything else. He did not consult Luo Nan for his opinion either. He changed the portion of power that protected Luo Nan's mental senses a bit, sending the mental senses of this publicly acknowledged troublemaker out of the logic world. By the time Luo Nan came back to his senses, his soul body was floating outside the conjoined buildings of the real world. The main body of Frost River reality, which had been smashed to pieces in the logic world, was still safely and unscathed within the darkness. On the other hand, Luo Nan's Star River diagram was growing more and more chaotic. It was only at this time that Luo Nan discovered that the clash between the two powerful individuals was not limited to the logic world. Their powers possessed astonishing penetrative power and stability. They forcefully broke through the barriers of the logic world and transmitted their attacks to this plane. Even though Luo Nan's mental senses were completely powerless, the construction of his life sketches was truly affected. The pressure increased greatly. Luo Nan did not need to think too much. He began to rapidly shrink the range of his senses. From his perspective, this was something that could be done with a single thought. But soon, he felt that something was wrong. The Star River diagram was a combination of life sketches. It was equivalent to a drawing that Luo Nan had personally drawn. This thing could not be withdrawn or deleted just because he wanted to. The corresponding information had already been deeply engraved in his mind. It had a real and tangible effect on Luo Nan. On the mental plane, information and energy were interconnected. When the range of his senses expanded out, it was nothing more than this. But when it suddenly contracted, the complex information could be compressed. The corresponding energy converged into a flood and brushed past Luo Nan's soul body. Whether it was his soul or his main body that was over a dozen kilometers away, all of them trembled. Luo Nan was no stranger to this feeling. Every time the sacrificial ritual was completed within the altar frame, every time the wraith sign obtained a great harvest from its hunt, the corresponding feedback would always arrive. His soul was growing stronger, and trouble followed him like a shadow. This time, it seemed to be a bit bigger. In the past, the endurance of his soul body had yet to reach its peak. But this time it was completely different. The range of his senses had shrunk by less than half. The swelling, exploding, and dizziness were endlessly magnified. This caused the gathering and operation of energy and information to show signs of losing control. What was even worse was that the two powerful individuals were clashing on the mental plane right now. Large amounts of useful and useless energy and information were stuffed in. His soul body had reached its limit. Or could it be said that the operating structure of energy and information, the amount of energy and information that the soul configuration could handle, had finally reached its limit? This loss of control caused the boundaries of the large amounts of information to blur and muddle together. Which was his self-awareness? Which were the insignificant memories and impressions on the periphery? These things were needed together. They interfered and influenced each other. It seemed that they would soon be unable to operate. No, this absolutely could not happen. Luo Nan knew that he could not continue like this. He needed a buffer, a flood outlet. He couldn't think of anything else right now. He could only rely on his previous successful experience. The external neuron. A bolt of lightning pierced his mind. Luo Nan's body bounced up and fell back down within the car. He began to convulse on the brink of death. The numbers of the instruments on the scene rose and fell violently. They didn't go all the way down. Instead, they jumped back and forth, each one off the charts. It was as if they had fallen into a powerful magnetic field. They no longer had any value as a reference. Everyone in the car, from Bai Xinyan to Zhang Yingying, from Shuelei to Red Fox, Cat Eyes and Papercut, were indescribably shocked. Rustling sounds rang in the ears of several members of the society at this time. The psychic wave network, which had stopped functioning for some time, began to restore communications. It was just that the first wave of information was quite strange. Amidst the rustling noise that was like the rise and fall of a tide, thoughts that opposed each other with equal harshness materialized into cold and hard words. All those who profane the holy object are to be purged by the order. Then let the war begin. The leisurely and unhurried reply was like a gentle breeze brushing past the ears. But the inner meaning of the words, as well as the corresponding strength and identity, made the members of the society look at each other in dismay. Then everyone turned their gazes to a single person at practically the same time. What the hell is your boss doing? Zhang Yingying spread her hands. She was rarely speechless. Chapter 259. Chup chup, chirp chirp chirp. Xie Junping pursed his lips, flicked his tongue, and made a tempting sound. Unfortunately, he had forgotten to place a loudspeaker at the front. It was a big mistake, and it was destined to be of no help. Fortunately, the night vision camera at the front was still quite powerful. The wretched green image was rendered by colored light. When it was transmitted back, it had been restored to the greatest extent, and it was closer to reality. In the dim corner of the tree hole, a fat brown-haired creature could be seen. It was standing on its hind legs and moving its front claws. In its blunt mouth, the sharp upper and lower incisors were squeaking, and it looked vigilant and nervous. Yes, yes, come to Daddy obediently. Xie Junping grinned, adjusted the joystick, and pressed a button. The spider-shaped bionic mechanical platform locked onto the target, and the anesthetic needle shot out. The brown-haired creature could be seen trembling, and its upright body fell forward. Bingo! Xie Junping shouted, and forcefully pulled the joystick, commanding the mechanical spider to sprint on the slippery steps. Its forelimbs stretched out, and blue and white electric flames appeared at the tips. Brown-haired rat, let your daddy love you. A perfect stab. The target was right in front of him. Who would have thought that the brown-haired rat, which was in a stiff state just a moment ago, would use its tail, which was almost 2/3 of its body length, to lash out like a whip. It actually knocked the electric forelimbs of the spider askew, and it was unscathed. Then, its fat body leaped up, and it was more than 1/2 meter tall. It moved horizontally on the inner wall of the treehouse, and it walked 5 or 6 steps as if it was juggling. After landing, it jumped a few more times, avoiding the metal web that the mechanical spider shot out. It followed the steps all the way down, and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared around the corner, and the faint sound of falling into water could be heard. F***CKU. Xie Junping temporarily ignored the face of the target of his delusion, and he almost smashed the joystick. Then, he slapped his head hard, and the immersion helmet made a dull sound. There was no time to be too upset. He called out, "Underwater view," and soon the scene in front of him changed into an even more murky and dark underwater area. The visual mode had already been adjusted. Thanks to the high-end underwater camera, the scene here was restored quite well. The bloody light of the setting sun pierced through the jungle and spread out in the shallow waters. Waves occasionally swept past, and huge black fish swam past. It was full of vitality, as if he could touch it with his hand. It was as if he had personally entered the water. Xie Junping did not have the leisure to admire the underwater scenery. He pushed the joystick forward, and the silent motor started. The military mini unmanned submarine that he had bought with a lot of money leapt out like a barracuda. The meaningless venting of his emotions made him lose the best opportunity. The brown-haired rat that had dived out from beneath the sandbar had leaped under the front of the mini submarine. Its underwater speed was surprisingly fast. Xie Junping didn't say anything else. He gritted his teeth and activated the fire control system. Who knew that the target would swing its long tail and crash into the thick layer of mud underwater, stirring up a large amount of black mud and forcibly escaping from the lock of the fire control system. At this time, the mechanical spider that had entered automatic mode also crashed into the water. This thing was amphibious. Even if it couldn't float, it could still step on the mud at the bottom of the water to chase. This seems to be more effective. Xie Junping frantically tried to change the control mode, but how could he make it in time? In the end, he simply gritted his teeth and said, "Telekinesis mode." He immediately controlled the simpler mini-submarine and entered telekinesis mode. Combined with the automatic cruise function, it shuttled back and forth in the water. Xie Junping, on the other hand, endured the dizziness and strain of multitasking and controlled the mechanical spider to chase all the way. In the small lake in the swamp, muddy water flowed everywhere. The fish and prawns in the water and the birds and beasts on the lake were all alarmed. It was a mess. 5 minutes later, Xie Junping roared and smashed the joystick in his hand. "Oh my God!" Hu Huaying, who was coming in from the work elevator, saw a black shadow coming straight at his head. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and dodged to the side. The unidentified flying object brushed past his ear and heavily smashed into the inner wall of the elevator behind him. When he heard the explosion, his scalp went numb. He opened his mouth and wanted to curse, but he saw Xie Junping's helmet on top of his head. He was flustered and exasperated, but he almost twisted his neck because of his excessive emotions. Hu Huaying rolled his eyes and stopped cursing. But he didn't help either. He crossed his arms and watched Xie Junping torment himself. After Xie Junping took off his helmet and other peripherals, he mocked, "Brother Ping, you're getting more and more stingy. It's not a good time to go to Frost River reality. Just a full set of equipment. A joystick is nothing. I'm not playing games. Full set of equipment my ass. What do you play if not games? You don't understand." Xie Junping wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end, he just waved his hand. He looked helpless, but the flames that burned in his eyes did not weaken in the slightest. He took a few deep breaths and adjusted his emotions. What did the social worker's office say? Hu Huaying shrugged. It seems the Mystic Arts Research Society is really going to shrink. They're holding a change of leadership ahead of time. Old Du is going to retire. I think the possibility of borrowing the slope to get out of the donkey is a bit higher. It's said that there's a problem with one of their big financial backers. They might have to withdraw their investment. Xie Junping frowned and put down the helmet in his hand. He waved at Hu Huaying, indicating that the two of them should stop chatting in the control room and take the elevator to the surface. When he entered the elevator, he kicked the deformed multifunction joystick out of the elevator. It was obvious that he was still in a bad mood. The Rainbow Fund behind the Construction Society is very stable. So what? Hu Huaying spread her hands. I don't see any difference. The main thing is that our junior brother Luo has enemies all over the world. Li Xueqing of the Construction Society is certainly troublesome. But didn't Huang Bingjin go to the hospital and not come out? Those grandsons of the Divine Research Society are rolling up their sleeves and getting ready to demand justice. From what I see, it doesn't matter who takes over, it's all the same. What does junior brother Luo think? Xie Junping did not immediately answer. The elevator door opened and the two arrived at the tea house on the third floor of Gear. Xie Junping randomly found a recliner and laid his body on it. He lay there paralyzed, looking up at the sky and sighing. The setting sun shone down, sending the last remnants of the day's warmth into the room. The AI service terminal promptly delivered black tea at a suitable temperature. Xie Junping reached his hand out, wanting to take it, but he was too lazy. He hooked his finger around the porcelain cup's handle and turned his eyes. He looked around at the layout of the society building. It had always been cold and cheerless, but it was subtly different from 2 weeks ago. Over 10 days of single-handedly managing was the result. After a long time, Xie Junping sighed. No one wants to give it to me. In any case, I don't want to give it to anyone. Xie Junping closed his eyes on the recliner. The evening wind blew through the forest. It seeped through the window and blended into the setting sun's afterglow, dispelling the cold air. It then gracefully coiled around the large courtyard of the 15-story building. It seemed to carry a rhythmic whistle, low, thin, and long. The restless mood outside all day could be unwittingly washed away here, leaving behind only a wondrous tranquility. Well, except for that brown-skinned rat's challenge. As his thoughts turned, Xie Junping's line of sight seemed to extend all the way to the withered tree sandbar, merging with the spider platform and the miniature submarine there. The black mud that had chased after him underwater had already calmed down. What kind of chase would it be next time? Thinking about it this way, it was quite exciting. A light challenge wasn't too bad either. Xie Junping suddenly stared blankly. How could the scene in his mind suddenly be so clear and real? It was as if the underwater camera had captured it and sent it over. He suddenly sat up, but before he could think clearly, Hu Huaying on the other side was already drunk. My brother Ping. Right now we're talking about junior brother Luo. Chapter 260. The sound of water rumbled in his ears, and the strong water current hit his face like a knife. The pain was still a small matter. Luo Nan strove to stop his footsteps, but the Frost River waterway, which was unpredictable, didn't give him any chance. The high-speed frigid water and ice flows wrapped around him. His feet practically didn't touch the ground as he continued to move forward. In the space of a few breaths, Luo Nan felt a pressure assault the top of his head. He abruptly pulled his head back. The hard rock cut through the water's surface and dangerously cut through his scalp. Above the water layer was the rock layer. Luo Nan was already unable to poke his head out. However, he simply didn't have the time to take a deep breath just now. After tumbling for a distance, his body was already filled with a deep chill. He had lost all feeling in his 4 limbs. What was even worse was that his chest couldn't help but feel stuffy. The consequences of not having stored oxygen had appeared. Luo Nan's mind was in a daze. He unconsciously opened his mouth and nose and cold water poured in. Ah woo woo loo loo. Even a man made of iron wouldn't be able to endure the cold water pouring down his nose. Luo Nan's hands and feet struggled a few times before his eyes went black. Then a dark red glow enveloped him. Only the center of the circle shone faintly. This was the standard state of near death. It took a while before Luo Nan recovered. At the corner of his field of vision, the jumping number reached 10. Guide Nina's gentle voice prompted. The objective of this stage has been completed. The immersion helmet was powered off, and Luo Nan's consciousness withdrew from the reality interface. He felt the viscous nutrient fluid surge around him, and his soul strength, having lost its guidance, was in a similar situation. It was smashed back, but it was much more violent. Luo Nan silently recited the 16 words of "My Heart's a Prison." He utilized the chanting breathing technique to maintain his mental state in a peaceful state. In the depths of his mind, the chains rang a few times. After continuously shaking his soul power, it finally stabilized. However, there were still waves of soul power seeping into the ground. It was like a small waterfall rushing down a short cliff, constantly pressuring him. Very good. His condition is quite stable. Bai Xinyan's voice sounded, indicating that the treatment for the day had come to an end. You can enter the visiting hours earlier. That's nice, right? These last words were clearly not meant for Luo Nan. The water level of the nutrient fluid continued to drop at this time. Luo Nan extended his hand and took off his helmet. The blood-red glow of the setting sun cut through the window and spread out on the outer walls of the treatment pod. The glow blended together with the turbid nutrient fluid. Everything he looked at was covered in a haze of light. Luckily, Luo Nan didn't use his eyes much right now. He naturally knew what changes were happening outside. He extended his hand and knocked on the inner wall of the cabin. He sent a message through the hexa ear in his ear. Good afternoon, Sister He. Isn't this Secretary He? Bai Xinyan, who was looking through the surveillance records, said casually. No one paid any attention to her. He Yueyin wore a neat and tidy professional suit. She stood outside the healing pod. Though Luo Nan might not be able to see her clearly, she still gave a slight bow out of habit. Good afternoon, Mr. Luo. It would take some time for the nutrient fluid to be completely extracted. He Yueyin used the hexa ear to ask about Luo Nan's specific situation. Luo Nan grunted and grunted in response. There were some words that he could not understand, and he was unable to explain them clearly. A week had passed since the incident at Frost River Reality. His original plan to return to school and study had died in the womb. His permission to leave the hospital had been revoked, and he was once again placed under 24-hour surveillance. Bai Xinyan was personally in charge of this. One could see just how negative the society's judgment of Luo Nan's body's condition was from the way they handled things. But Luo Nan really didn't think so. Unfortunately, he couldn't say it. He Yueyin also discovered that asking Luo Nan was actually useless. In the end, she still needed to find a professional. She looked at Bai Xinyan. Bai Xinyan casually tapped the flexible screen interface. The gain value hovers between -17 and -25. It's an acceptable range. As I said just now, it's relatively stable. The so-called gain value was also known as the effect value. It was a quantification of the degree of coordination between the body and soul in Bai Xinyan's laboratory. Generally speaking, it reflected the way, structure, and degree of mutual interference between the mental and material planes were good or bad. A positive value represented a positive gain and a positive effect. A negative value represented a negative effect. A zero value represented no gain and no decrease. Looking at this standard, the higher the gain value, the better. It was normal for a normal ability user to gain or lose 1 or 2 points under normal circumstances. It was more obvious when it went over 10 points. Luo Nan's gain value was negative, and it broke through 20 points. It was certainly a more serious type. But at this level, a normal person's state would be like an avalanche. He could still fluctuate up and down. He was indeed relatively stable. How stable is he? There aren't any particularly intense mood changes. As long as he doesn't do any intense exercise, he should have no problems living a normal life as a sickly invalid. Actually, there's no point in looking around. Moderate exercise, moderate rest, and maintaining a good mood are more important than anything else. I can't stop a beauty from rolling in the sheets, right? It's fine as long as you're happy. Luo Nan had just opened the healing pod when he heard this. He was speechless for a time. However, he had interacted with Bai Xinyan for a long time over the past few days. He had a better understanding of this person's temperament, and he gained a bit of immunity. He just pretended not to hear and lowered his head to find clothes to wear. He Yueyin tilted her face slightly and stared at Bai Xinyan. Bai Xinyan smiled as usual. Luo Nan had been shuttling in and out of the healing pod for many days. He was used to exposing his chest, back, thighs and the like. The thickness of his skin had increased. He draped a patient's robe over his shoulders and called it a day. He knew his own situation. Right now, Luo Nan's curiosity was placed elsewhere. What's the situation like outside? The Order of Justice hasn't sent anyone over yet? He Yueyin didn't answer. Instead, Bai Xinyan spoke slowly. You don't even care about your own injuries. It looks like you're quite eager for things to blow up. At this point, Bai Xinyan simply overstepped her boundaries and gave Luo Nan a lesson. Oh, student Luo Nan. You need to know that in the battle at Frost River reality, there's no meaning in fighting over things or how many people die. Right now, the only thing everyone is concerned about is that the martial monarch has become an extraordinary. Moreover, she's able to contend against the might of the holy artifact invited by the Order of Justice's Arcablatum. This is more important than anything else. Extraordinary. Luo Nan recalled the final stage of the conflict. Two powerful forces leaped back and forth, fighting fiercely across space. Even though most of the area was on the mental plane, the power that occasionally leaped into the material plane still blasted the logic world into pieces. Only later did Luo Nan learn that the first to cut in and cover for An Wang was the Order of Justice's Arcablatum, borrowing the power of the scales of truth. The one who cut in later was Zhang Yingying's boss, the legendary woman known as the martial monarch. It's impossible to overestimate the significance of an extraordinary, Bai Xinyan explained in depth. Bai Xinyan explained in depth, in any power in the world, extraordinaries are a symbol of strength and rules. In recent years, Ouyang Chen, the martial monarch, and Old Yu have formed an iron triangle, stabilizing the foundation of the society in Xia City. Right now, two of the three have become extraordinary. The society's influence in Xia City has skyrocketed. They will certainly fight for the right to speak. Quantum Corporation has done it in Luo City. That place has become a paradise for capital. In AI City, the Order of Justice has done it. That place is the kingdom of God on earth. But upon closer examination, one of them is a company that clearly pursues the greatest profit. The other is an order with a clear doctrine. What can the society bring out? Some sort of lifestyle. Perhaps they can borrow a shell and use it in another direction. Chapter 261. The general he that Bai Xinyan spoke of should be referring to He Yueyin's father, the high-ranking officer of Xia City's coastal defense force, He Buozheng. Speaking of which, this person could be considered Cragburst's old superior. He was relatively low-key in the military and had a decent reputation. However, the most powerful member of the He family was He Yueyin's grandfather, General He Chong. That man was one of the brightest generals of World War III, once serving as the highest commander of the space exploration fleet directly under the Star Alliance Committee. He was a standard military bigshot who had retired many years ago, but he had countless old acquaintances in the military and held a lofty position. He Buozheng had the shadow of his father, and his conduct was quite commendable. If he were to enter the political arena after he retired, there was indeed a lot of hope for him to become an administrative official of his hometown, Xia City. Of course, this involved a rather complicated layer of politics. The ability user society was already outside the scope of Luo Nan's understanding. He racked his brain to think, but he couldn't figure it out. Instead, his throat felt itchy and he started coughing again. From start to finish, He Yueyin had no interest in such topics. It was as if the person Bai Xinyan was talking about was someone completely unrelated to her. Seeing Luo Nan cough, she brought a cup of water over to him. She smoothly and logically changed the topic back to Luo Nan, Mr. Luo's nervous system damage shouldn't be worsening right now, right? Bai Xinyan chuckled. Her gaze swept across Luo Nan's face. Frankly speaking, it's very hard for there to be a clear improvement. I've spent too much time right now to help him control the rate at which his soul strength grows. This has caused the medical progress to lag greatly. If this continues, then the amount of time we spend together day and night will increase. Student Luo Nan, are you sure you didn't do this on purpose? Luo Nan corrected him earnestly from the bottom of his heart. The Frost River waterway is where I spend all my time. Actually, there was no problem with Bai Xinyan's professional explanation. Luo Nan's biggest problem right now was the uncontrollable growth of his soul strength. The drawing of the life sketches, the understanding of the order framework, the sacrificial hunting of the wraith symbol, and so on had pushed his soul power to new heights time and time again. Luo Nan even discovered that as long as he released his mental senses, as long as he used clairvoyance and cognition, the growth of his soul strength would run through the entire process. It was like the autumn rain on a calm lake. Unknowingly, it had overflowed the bridge and overflowed the embankment. Naturally, it put more and more pressure on the body. In response, Bai Xinyan's treatment method was the Frost River path. This could be considered a sort of cage therapy. Luo Nan's soul strength was confined in this monotonous and repetitive environment of knowledge. He used one high difficulty test after another to continuously consume his soul strength. This method could not solve the root of the problem, but it could still be used as an emergency measure. The problem was that there were 3 versions of the Frost River waterway. One was a simplified version that could only be used on ordinary people. One was the professional guide version that Bai Xinyan took out. It was suitable for metahumans to use and could be used for analysis and guidance. The last one was the deluxe complete version that Luo Nan had found using the external neuron. Of course, the professional guidance version wasn't bad either. But Luo Nan had experienced the complete version, which covered the archetype format's cultivation in elite mode. Returning to this emasculated version made Luo Nan feel like he was at a disadvantage. Also, Bai Xinyan would monitor every practice from the outside. It was hard for Luo Nan to dispel his vigilance against this female doctor, who was clearly involved in the research of the archetype format. This week had been truly arduous for him. Taking advantage of the fact that Yuan was here, Luo Nan expressed his wish once more. Maybe we can try adding body exercises. In the end, this is the problem of the imbalance between body and soul. Blindly consuming soul strength and not strengthening the fleshly body is like drawing a prison. That's a good word to use. Bai Xinyan pursed her lips into a smile. Her gaze roamed, and she sized up Luo Nan once more. As a doctor, of course I want to do a radical cure. But I must emphasize that for any type of autonomous body exercise, increasing the quantity is an inevitable choice. With your current situation, it's best if you don't get your hopes up. Then wait for your laboratory to come and reform me? Luo Nan didn't say anything, but his heart was filled with unhappiness. Bai Xinyan's current treatment plan was to use special nanomaterials to cast Luo Nan's body from the outside to the inside. It was said that the basic method was to use special nanomaterials to cast the relevant neurons and internal organs. This would rapidly increase the endurance of the fleshly body while repairing the damage. In the past, Luo Nan wouldn't have been particularly opposed to this restoration plan. After all, Bai Xinyan's clay laboratory was a top-notch research organization for the restoration and strengthening of the nervous system. Her instructor was the person in charge of the laboratory, Dr. Clay. He was the leading authority on this project. But ever since the incident at Frost River Reality, Luo Nan became more and more wary of Bai Xinyan. He really didn't want to put his life on the line for this laboratory that might have an unclear relationship with Quantum Corporation. Especially with the growth of Luo Nan's soul strength, the transformation ratio in the plan grew larger and larger. It was no longer in the scope of simple nerve restoration. Even Octopus, who was in charge of contacting Dr. Clay, was a bit unsure. Luo Nan's thoughts weren't hidden deep enough. Bai Xinyan saw through him with a glance. It's not rare for a patient to reject a doctor's treatment plan. It's not uncommon for patients to prescribe their own medicine. But imagination isn't a scalpel. Even if it is, it will only stir up a mess here. Her slender fingers drew a circle near her temple. Clearly, she was talking about a certain someone's brain damage. Luo Nan mumbled to himself, "What's the point of self-logic?" Oh, student Luo Nan wants to discuss the principles of treatment for ability users? In terms of professional knowledge, even 10 Luo Nans tied together were no match for Bai Xinyan. Naturally, Luo Nan wouldn't argue with her. He could only lower his head in silence. He Yueyin opened her mouth to speak. Before Dr. Clay arrived and confirmed the treatment plan, Mr. Luo's situation had always been variable. A week ago, we probably wouldn't have imagined that things would turn out like this. Bai Xinyan raised her eyebrows. That's true. Luo Nan gaped. He couldn't tell whether He Yueyin was helping him out of his predicament or if she was stabbing him in the back. He Yueyin didn't give him too much time to think. She spoke directly to him. Mr. Luo, I'm very happy to see that your state has stabilized. So, according to the requirements of the Society's new member training, the Society has decided to arrange a series of general knowledge learning missions for you. The intensity and difficulty aren't high, but a certain degree of concentration is required. I hope you can prepare yourself. As she spoke, He Yueyin transmitted a study schedule through the hexa ear. Luo Nan skimmed through it. It included knowledge learning, skill practice, mission practice and so on. It seemed to conform to the norm, but why did the lecturers all look so familiar? He Yueyin was at the top of the list. Her course was World Order in and out of the Psychic Wave Network. There was also Crag Burst's Universal Commands Crash Course, Bamboo Pole's Notes on the Most Important People in the World, and even Red Fox's Tracking and Anti-Tracking Practice, Papercut's Soul Strength Activation Techniques, and so on. Chapter 262. Bai Xinyan asked him with a beaming smile. Do you know them all? This judgment was a bit amazing. Bai Xinyan definitely could not see the information on the Psychic Wave Network. How could she guess it? Bai Xinyan met Luo Nan's rare gaze of admiration and blinked. It's easy to guess. It's easier to accept a troublemaker like you after interacting with you. You must be joking. It's because you're already marked in the hearts of many people. The Society has no confidence in their methods of keeping secrets, so they created a relatively closed circle for you. Unfortunately, your ability to cause trouble is probably useless. Luo Nan had an embarrassed expression, but he was secretly alarmed. It was mainly because he heard the word, closed. He subconsciously flipped through his class schedule. Learning things was great, but he absolutely did not want to be sealed in a small circle. He had already spent 2 weeks in the hospital. He could endure the loneliness, but how could research and being researched be the same? He Yueyin seemed to have seen through his thoughts. Considering Mr. Luo's situation in school, the training time is mainly arranged at night. There's no conflict. Between the lines, it was a refutation of Bai Xinyan's closed-door attitude. Luo Nan gave him a wake-up call. Yeah, he had nearly forgotten about going to school. It was already the middle of October. He had actually devoted half of his high school time to the hospital. If this continued, it would be hard to avoid having to stay a year. He consulted Bai Xinyan. With my situation, when can I go back to school and attend classes? As long as you can guarantee 10 practice sessions at Frost River Reality in the morning and in the evening, you can go back any time. Bai Xinyan's reply was direct and efficient, but she still stabbed him in the back. I thought you were playing dumb and not mentioning it. Luo Nan vowed not to talk to Bai Xinyan again tonight. He Yueyin looked at her watch. If it's convenient for Mr. Luo, can we start right now? Up to you guys. I'm fine with it. Luo Nan and Bai Xinyan hurried over together. They could not help but roll their eyes. You guys do what you need to do. Bai Xinyan giggled as she packed up her equipment. After everything was in order, she waved her hand and bid them farewell. Even though Luo Nan was on guard against her in every possible way, he had no choice but to admit that she really did have the flavor of a woman. It could even be said to be pleasing to the eye. But who knew that in this moment of absent-mindedness, Bai Xinyan's slender and moist fingertips would gently wipe Luo Nan's cheek. Focus on class. Don't get distracted. All right, it's best if you go take a bath first. Bai Xinyan twirled her fingers and walked out with a smile. Luo Nan grinned. His face was a bit hot, but it was more of a headache. Coincidentally, He Yueyin's line of sight fell on him. Embarrassed, he blurted out, I'm going to take a bath. As soon as the words left his mouth, he wanted to slap himself. He Yueyin was as calm as ever. She said softly, Your wariness is too obvious. Luo Nan was stunned for a moment. The more nervous you are, the more white salt wants to tease you. That's just how she is. A typical feline. This was the first time Luo Nan had seen He Yueyin describe a person behind his back. But was this an admonishment or an endorsement? Everyone should have a secret that only they know. Mr. Luo's attitude is correct. It's just that there's still room for adjustment. I hope that this period of training will bring about a certain change. As she spoke, He Yueyin raised her hand slightly, indicating for Luo Nan to do as he pleased. It looked like He Yueyin was on guard against Bai Xinyan. Luo Nan let out a sigh of relief in his heart after obtaining her approval. He thought about the following classes and rushed into the bathroom. He took a combat bath and changed into his normal clothes. He obediently returned to listen to He Yueyin's class after he was refreshed. Let's start with the application of the Hexa-ear. He Yueyin had promised to teach him the relevant knowledge of the Hexa-ear and the psychic wave network 2 weeks ago. Before this, Luo Nan had only obtained some basic knowledge from Zhang Yingying. He could feel that He Yueyin's class was far more complete and rigorous than Zhang Yingying's. Perhaps it was less interesting, but in a practical sense, it was much more effective than the so-called happy education. Luo Nan gained a clearer understanding of the 6 communication layers of the Hexa-ear in a short amount of time. He also did some strengthening exercises on some of the functions frequently used by the members of the society. Of course, He Yueyin's teaching goals were far from just this. It could be seen from the name of her class that it was an extremely macro topic. The Hexa-ear and the psychic wave network were just a starting point. Of course, these things would only be revealed later. He Yueyin's ability to grasp time was absolutely top-notch. The first class lasted approximately 40 minutes, ending just in time for family visitation. Luo Nan could see from the communication screen that today was quite lively. Shuelei had also arrived, aside from his aunt, Mrs. Luo Shuqing, who had to come and look after him every day. That's all for today. He Yueyin nodded to Luo Nan and prepared to leave. Luo Nan hesitated for a moment before opening his mouth. Sister He. Ha! He Yueyin stood under the last ray of light from the setting sun. Her face was not too clear, but her usual ramrod straight heroic posture became more and more prominent. Luo Nan suddenly discovered that he was actually unable to imagine He Yueyin's appearance outside of an official setting. But the words had already been spoken and it was hard to take them back. He could only brace himself and continue speaking. Sister He, it just so happens that my aunt and Shuelei are both here. How about we go out for a meal? These weren't polite words. Luo Nan had been mulling over this entire time. He wanted to develop a personal relationship with He Yueyin. Of course he didn't mean it that way. He just wanted to become more familiar with her. It didn't matter if it was the society's arrangement or He Yueyin's own judgment. She was a former Special Forces officer with an extraordinary family background. She was even more outstanding than He Yueyin. She had always assumed the posture of a secretary in front of Luo Nan, serving him. This was absolutely not a normal situation. No matter how happy Luo Nan's mood was, the rational part of him needed to be vigilant at all times. Don't get carried away. It was precisely because of this feeling of unease in his heart that Luo Nan tried to understand He Yueyin a bit more. At the very least, could they be friends? There will be a chance in the future. He Yueyin gave a polite response that could be expected. Her face was calm and peaceful from beginning to end. It was impossible to tell whether she was happy or angry. She walked out of the ward under Luo Nan's attentive gaze. She just so happened to bump face to face with Luo Shuqing and Shuelei. Shuelei, who had been cautiously conversing with Luo Shuqing, immediately jumped in fright. He had a deep impression of this woman who killed in 10 steps. After the incident at Frost River Reality, he had specifically asked the gym master about her. The gym master's attitude was very strange. Though he didn't really understand, he felt a sense of reverence in his heart. He instinctively bowed. Secretary He. He didn't know how to address her properly. He saw Zhang Yingying and the others address her as such, so he blurted it out. He Yueyin didn't mind. She gave a slight nod and bowed towards Luo Shuqing. Ms. Luo. Luo Shuqing and He Yueyin had met a few times during this week. Luo Shuqing only knew that He Yueyin was a government employee of the police department. She was in charge of the investigation and evidence collection work at Frost River Reality. Luo Shuqing immediately greeted her with a smile. There was a bit of distance amidst the politeness. After all, no one wanted their child to be questioned so many times. It was as if the victim had turned into a suspect. Chapter 263. Shuelei enjoyed VIP treatment on Luo Nan's side. The host was Mrs. Luo Shuqing. Last time at the Limestone Water Village pub, Luo Shuqing brought Shuelei home. She had a good impression of this tall and strong boy with a gentle temperament. However, what caused his status to soar was the incident at Frost River Reality. That night, Luo Nan stayed in the conflict zone. He was practically the last to be evacuated, and he was hospitalized in a coma. There was no way to hide this matter. When Mrs. Luo Shuqing heard of this, she was furious. From Mo Chiu to Mo Pang, anyone related to that night's gathering was given a torrent of abuse by her. Luo Nan was so scared that he had to pretend to be unconscious for a while. How to explain what happened that night became a big problem. In the end, Zhang Yingying came up with a plan. She used the Shui father and son to divert attention. She said that Luo Nan was frightened and that Shui Weiluan and Shui Lei worked together to save him. The father and son both received favors from Luo Nan. They were also half-insiders, so it was easy for them to make statements. Under the skillful hands of the copywriter, the reason was woven seamlessly. Luo Nan was given the image of an enthusiastic citizen who assisted the police, erasing the crime of leaving the group that night. Because of this, Mo Haihang and Luo Shuqing invited Shui Lei and his family to dinner. It was quite a coincidence. Shui Weiluan was the backbone of the special forces, and Mo Haihang was the technical expert of the SCA. They had cooperated twice in the field of crimes involving social authority. They were not strangers. The two families got along well, and the relationship between the two families rapidly warmed. However, Shui Lei was quite tired. When Luo Shuqing was around, it was hard to avoid the topic of that night. Shui Lei was afraid that he would slip up and waste all his previous efforts. In the end, he would stick his head together with Luo Nan, grunting and grunting. No one knew what they were saying. Luo Nan looked at Shui Lei's embarrassed appearance and laughed until he coughed. He could not stop coughing. Even the acupressure technique that Mr. Bai taught him was not very effective. This scene was normal for Luo Nan, but Luo Shuqing could not help but feel anxious when she saw it. It's been half a month. Why isn't he better? When will Dr. Cly get here? She stood up as she spoke, wanting to massage Luo Nan's back to ease his breathing. Shui Lei rushed to take the lead. Aunt Qing, let me. His large hand pressed onto Luo Nan's back, slowly using force to rub it. Luo Nan hissed. It wasn't pain, but a marvelous heat seeped into his back. It dispersed into his 5 viscera and 6 bowels. It was as if clouds were rising, filling his throat. It was like the nourishment of warm water. Luo Nan's coughing improved greatly for a time. At this moment, Luo Shuqing could not sit still. She remembered that she had yet to understand the treatment situation today, so she immediately said, "Lazy, you and Nan can talk here. I'll go to Dr. Bai's place." "All right, Aunt Qing, you can go. I'll stay here to accompany Nanster." "Don't worry." Shui Lei had been lying for almost a week, so his mouth had become much sweeter. Luo Shuqing smiled at the two of them and hurried out. After the elders left, Shui Lei was able to speak more easily. As he massaged her, he said worriedly, "You can't keep coughing like this. The gym master once told me that breathing can inspect the internal organs, move the 100 meridians, and take in the soul. Breathing can observe heaven and earth, understand yin and yang, and understand the secrets of the universe. Breathing is a key valve that connects the inside and the outside, controlling the body and mind. If your breathing isn't good, your entire body will scatter. Anything you do will be half the result with twice the effort." Shui Lei only said half of what he wanted to say. With your current extraordinary abilities, your breathing rhythm is like this. Just how bad is your body? Just how hard will it be to recover? Luo Nan was able to understand Shui Lei's meaning. He had no way to deal with the state of his body. He could only chuckle a few times. Shui Lei relayed the gym master's half-written, half-spoken words, and the image of a sage-like old gentleman immediately appeared in Luo Nan's mind. As Shui Lei spoke, a thought that he had had before suddenly jumped out. In your situation, learning how to breathe should be quite useful. At the very least, it can adjust the state of your body. Nanster, why don't you come to our gym? Our gym master doesn't need to talk about anything else, but this is his ability in teaching disciples. Shuelei gave a thumbs up and extended it before Luonan's eyes. He even wiggled it a few times. Luonan didn't doubt this at all. To be able to open a gym, to be able to teach such an outstanding disciple as Shuelei, to be able to teach such a disciple as Shuelei, this old gentleman's ability was certainly worthy of trust. Luonan suddenly thought of something. They had known each other for so long, but he had never asked Shuelei what the name of the Daoguan Shuelei belonged to was. Luonan wanted to know how to address the gym master. Our gym is called Divine You. It's that. Divine You? You the great conquers the flood? Luonan spoke without thinking, but Shuelei went, ah, from behind him. Shuelei raised his hand and smacked Luonan's shoulder. Luonan nearly choked on his mucus and saliva. Shuelei was still unaware of this. He just shouted, Nanster, you're freaking awesome. Ha! When I mention the name of my gym to people, those deaf and blind people keep saying it's some fish restaurant. It makes people want to knock their teeth out when they hear it. It's you, Nanster. You're able to recognize the name in an instant. It looked like Shuelei had been disgusted by the fish restaurant during this period of time. Divine You, divine fish? It was indeed quite easy to forget. Luonan just acted as if he didn't know. He laughed. I made the connection from that cauldron. You collected the metal of the 9 shepherds and cast the 9 cauldrons. They all tasted and cooked gods, ghosts and gods. The ancient people constructed heaven and earth, society, and the overlapping format of the self. It still has a certain meaning to this day. These words were written in his grandfather's notebook. He had a deep impression of it. He casually read it out. It's just that the simple format of the ancient times is difficult to use today. Format? Overlapping? What kind of position was this? Shuelei didn't quite understand what Luonan was saying. He felt more and more that this new friend of his was quite different from a normal person's train of thought. It was precisely because of this train of thought that Luonan was always targeted and doubted. However, the facts proved that those baffling ideas were useful and very useful. That night, he was by Luonan's side. He watched as this friend of his was doubted, conflicted, and turned in a series of twists and turns. It was a roller coaster ride, and Luonan's previous impression of Luonan was completely washed away. But the feeling of congeniality didn't decrease. Instead, it continued to increase. Speaking of which, the gym master always spoke half-intelligible words all day long. With this kind of temperament, Luonan and the gym master would probably have a lot to talk about. The two of them should get along even more. Shuelei looked at Luonan once more with this thought, and his eyes lit up. He immediately did his utmost to promote Luonan. Our gym master's surname is Xiao. His name is the word Daoguan. He founded the Daoguan single-handedly. His reputation has always been excellent. If it weren't for the fact that the gym master likes to be quiet and doesn't do much management, the Daoguan would have become famous long ago. Xiao Shenyu? This name sounded quite like a classical Wuxia. It complemented the identity of the gym master of the Daoguan. Chapter 264. Luonan could feel that his aunt was already a bit frightened after being hospitalized for 2 weeks. Her care for him would certainly increase to a higher level. Unfortunately, he had joined the society and caused a lot of trouble. He also had to deal with his upcoming study plan. He needed a lot of free time. Being locked up at home like a prisoner bird was absolutely out of the question. Then there needed to be a reasonable reason. Shuelei's proposal was excellent. Divine Yu Gym was in the River Wu district. Training in martial arts would certainly take time. He might even need to attend morning classes. If he could make this happen, no matter how much his aunt worried about him, she wouldn't let him make a round trip to and fro every day. Wouldn't that apartment in Blue Bay come in handy? Of course, he needed the help of other people to accomplish this. Just Shuelei alone might not be able to do it. Who should he ask for help? Actually, Luonan didn't have a choice. He lowered his head to touch his wristband and found Bai Xinyan's contact information. He was about to make the call when he suddenly remembered that his aunt had already paid a visit. Wouldn't it be awkward if he made a phone call to get a confession? Luonan's mind stirred. He excused himself to go to the restroom and walked a few steps. The Star River scene was already reflected in his mind. Luo Nan intentionally controlled the range of his mental senses. The physical radius of his mental senses only covered a few nearby floors, but it was still several hundred life sketches stitched together. The interlacing starlight of the nebula revealed information on many levels. All Luo Nan needed to do was to extract the parts he was interested in, increase the precision of his senses, and perform clairvoyance. This sort of godlike perspective gave people an incomparable feeling. However, before Luo Nan could lock onto Bai Xinyan, he discovered another person. Strange. He Yueyin actually didn't leave. He Yueyin walked inside the building of Renai Hospital. She was heading in the direction of Bai Xinyan's temporary office. Bai Xinyan was a doctor of medicine from Clay's laboratory, a world-class expert in nerve repair. Although Renai Hospital only had Luo Nan as a patient, she received very high treatment. She had a large office that was like a luxurious suite. She could take a nap here during the night. There was nothing to nitpick about other than the fact that it was a bit far from Luo Nan's ward. He Yueyin didn't greet her. She just pushed open the door and entered. Inside the room, Bai Xinyan had already taken off her white lab coat. She was wearing a snow-white, high-collared cashmere sweater. The inflating effect of the color didn't make her look bloated. Instead, it accentuated her slender figure, revealing her curves. It was a sight to behold. Right now, there was a rather handsome male doctor who refused to stay in the name of an academic exchange. Even if he had nothing to say, he had to find something to say. He just wanted to stay until it was time to get off work so that he could treat this cool and hot female doctor to dinner. Bai Xinyan, on the other hand, was quite patient. She picked up a cup of coffee and chatted with him with a smile. She was not impatient at all. He Yueyin directly pushed open the door and entered, startling the already infatuated male doctor. He was about to lose his temper, but when he turned his head, he saw a pair of cold and clear eyes. He felt an inexplicable chill in his heart and instinctively became timid. "Professor Bai, your friend?" Bai Xinyan smiled and nodded. At the same time, she raised the cup in her hand. Her meaning was clear. The male doctor had wanted to introduce himself and get to know another beautiful woman, but when he saw this, he couldn't help but feel a bit embarrassed. He didn't have the courage to do so, so he shrunk his head and left. Bai Xinyan sipped a mouthful of hot coffee. She had no intention of politely entertaining him. In any case, she would just be asking for a snub. He Yueyin directly walked forward and stood face to face with Bai Xinyan. In terms of height, she was a bit shorter than Bai Xinyan. However, her cold and serious aura made her seem a bit more powerful. "Across the ocean, I didn't invite you over from Luoyang City to do some kind of happy therapy." Bai Xinyan had a free and easy demeanor. She moved her cup away and said innocently, "Do you want me to drill your boss until he cries every day? Is that what you want?" "White Salt. I understand you. You've once told me yourself that as long as it's a pleasure therapy, it's only for the dead. In Luoyang City, you treated me like this." Bai Xinyan couldn't help but laugh. She reached out to touch He Yueyin's cheek. "But you're alive and well, and you're so beautiful." He Yueyin waved away Bai Xinyan's extended hand. Her expression was tranquil. "You know my condition better than I do." "All right, Ms. TX. Oh, a nun is a bit more intimate. What I want to tell you is that doctors have the right to make plans, but any plan must be built on the foundation of the patient's own situation. Whether it's happy therapy or active intervention, there will always be a plan based on the condition of the patient. This is objective reality and nothing else." Bai Xinyan swirled her coffee cup, letting the black liquid sway along the edge of the cup. Not even a speck of it spilled out. "From what I've observed, your boss is currently paired with a happy therapy. This is the best choice. As for whether or not variables will appear in the time to come, I'm looking forward to it." "Are you satisfied with this answer?" "It's already at the level of an incurable disease." Luo Nan could clearly sense the confrontation between the two beauties from beginning to end. But he wasn't like the cliché TV dramas, where the heavens fell and the earth cracked, where life was no longer interesting. Luo Nan just shrugged his shoulders in the bathroom. He sighed with emotion. It seemed that the external neuron had done something again. This marvelous little thing could bear the heavy pressure of soul strength, and it could achieve perfect self-concealment. It had evaded the probing of Ouyang Chen, Bai Xinyan, and the others one after another, resulting in misjudgments. It made him seem overly naive and optimistic. Actually, it wasn't that Luo Nan didn't know the severity of the situation. On the contrary, his judgment of the degree of imbalance between body and soul was more pessimistic than anyone else. It was just that he was able to hold on by relying on the marvelous usage of the external neuron. Bai Xinyan's judgment didn't scare him. Instead, He Yuan's concern hidden beneath her calm attitude moved him quite a bit. Luo Nan sensed that his aunt was about to arrive at Bai Xinyan's office at this time. He couldn't delay any longer. He hurriedly gave Bai Xinyan a call. Bai Xinyan, who was in confrontation, was slightly startled. She laughed and flashed her wristband at He Yuan. She immediately connected the call. "Student Luo Nan, are you feeling unwell anywhere?" Dr. Bai, there's something I want to ask you." "What is it?" "It's the tolerance of my body right now." "Are you peeping?" "The range of your mental senses should be able to cover this area. If you keep going around and around like this, I can only assume that you have a guilty conscience." Bai Xinyan's gaze circled around the air. It was as if she could really see through Luo Nan. Luo Nan knew that he hadn't been discovered, but he still jumped in fright. In the end, he didn't cut off his clairvoyance. He mentally prepared himself and treated this as some sort of special videophone. He took a deep breath and spoke. "I want to ask Dr. Bai to give me a permit for normal physical training." "Oh, I just said that you can't increase your strength." "No, I just want to learn breathing techniques to relieve coughs." This concept probably exceeded Bai Xinyan's expectations. She clearly muttered to herself for a moment before saying, "Where to?" "The gym." No. Leister recommended it. "It's the gym he cultivates in." "Leister? Shuelei?" Bai Xinyan muttered to herself once more after confirming the reason. He Yuan nodded at her at this time, indicating that she agreed. Luo Nan saw it, and Bai Xinyan certainly saw it as well. However, she didn't follow He Yuan's script. Instead, she revealed a mysterious smile. "What's the name of the gym?" "Divine You." Divine You Gym. Chapter 265. There was something wrong with this atmosphere. Luo Nan began to regret making this call. No. He had made the right call. He had a cat-like curiosity in his heart. But in the end, He Yuan and Bai Xinyan didn't say much. Bai Xinyan used a very normal tone to reply. "Since it's that Shuelei, you can give it a try. He should be from a traditional martial arts school. He's an expert in this area. But you need to pay attention. You're only suited for breathing, Daoyin, Tai Chi, yoga, and other gentle and soothing exercises. If the school doesn't mind, we'll need to keep a file for research. If these conditions are met, I can give you a prescription." Luo Nan had no reason not to agree. His call came at just the right time. His aunt just happened to be outside the door. Luo Nan immediately hung up the call. At nearly the same time, there was a knock on the door. The two ladies with extraordinary bearings glanced at each other once more. Bai Xinyan surveyed the nothingness of the room. She snorted faintly, causing Luo Nan to curse in his mind. His timing was far too accurate. It seemed that he had been suspected. But what happened next concerned his lifestyle for a period of time. Even if he had to be thick-skinned, he had to see it to the end. In any case, with his mental senses, those two wouldn't be able to get anything on him, right? Mrs. Luo Shuqing entered the room and saw He Yuan, the investigator. She was a bit surprised for a time and became even more vigilant. At this stage, she absolutely didn't want her nephew to enter the line of sight of the police. Even though she knew that the problem wasn't big, she wasn't willing to take any risks. He Yuan was very clear about the situation, so she didn't say anything more. She called out to Luo Shuqing, brushed past her shoulder, and pushed the door open. Next was Bai Xinyan's time to shine. Perhaps it was because she was a supervisor, but Bai Xinyan handled matters very straightforwardly. She relied on her excellent professional knowledge and her silver tongue to temporarily dispel Mrs. Luo Shuqing's suspicions in a few short minutes. She even gave a positive hint. "Reasonable and moderate exercise is good for your nephew's recovery." Luo Nan, who had been spying this entire time, naturally understood what she meant. He let out a long sigh of relief. He took into consideration that Shuelei was still waiting outside, so he didn't continue spying. He withdrew his mental senses. Bai Xinyan sent off Aunt Luo Nan. Today's work was over. She didn't want to stay in this depressing building with endless illnesses. She quickly packed up, put on a windbreaker out of habit, and left after work. She took the elevator to the parking lot and was wondering if she should contact Zhang Yingying to go to a nightclub together. Suddenly, she felt something and stopped in her tracks, turning her head to look. What greeted him was a cold stare, as dense as the north wind. Even the interior of the building, which had a constant temperature all year round, seemed to have dropped to the freezing point. He Yuan knew that this person wouldn't let her off so easily. Bai Xinyan immediately raised her hands in surrender. Stop glaring at me, my dear. I'm not trying to pry into your privacy. Your source of information. Hey, this is an open secret, okay? Open. Everything related to Luo Nan, the Luo family, and formatting theory? Bai Xinyan was speechless for a moment. This old friend of hers had obviously chosen the wrong line on purpose. Moreover, it seemed like she really did not care about her own private affairs at all. She pointed directly to the more sensitive areas without any disguise. He Yuan was overbearing. To a certain extent, your instructor's laboratory works for Quantum Corporation. It involves the theory of the modification and evolution of the nervous system, and it has the same origin as the archetype format. The formatting theory of the Luo family should have been the goal you all strive to obtain. But why have you never had any thoughts of obtaining it all these years? Or perhaps you originally coveted it, but you discovered a flaw that was difficult to overcome, just like what Mr. Luo is displaying right now? Are you flaunting your reasoning ability? Bai Xinyan shook her windbreaker and covered her collar. She wanted to shield herself from the cold air that assaulted her face, but she couldn't help but sigh. Or are you saying that you think that it would be better for him, and for the current situation in Xia City, if we let that little voyeur reserve duty kid overturn everything here? He Yuan stared at Bai Xinyan. A moment later, she walked expressionlessly toward the sports car that Bai Xinyan had just purchased a few days ago. She directly opened the door and sat inside. Bai Xinyan shrugged her shoulders. She got in the car and started it up. Then she did a beautiful drift in the narrow space and sped toward the exit. Soon, she merged into the city's surging traffic. After leaving Renai Hospital several kilometers away, He Yuan spoke once more. Give me the relevant information. Everything. I don't have it. Bai Xinyan's reply was straightforward and to the point. The research related to formatting theory ended very quickly. The conclusion the higher-ups came to was that there was no value in continuing the research. I can tell you the reason. After over 1,000 repeated experiments, it was determined that no one could withstand the rapid expansion of soul strength. It seems that you only have a smattering of knowledge regarding formatting theory. Then can I give you an introduction? Do you need it? He Yuan's eyelids drooped slightly. She didn't say a word. Then don't blame me for talking too much. Bai Xinyan set the sports car to autopilot mode. She hugged the back of her head with both hands and adopted a lazy posture. According to Quantum Corporation's research, the formatting theory you speak of is confirmed to be a completely uncontrollable method of soul strength growth. The source is Luo Yuandao, who is also your boss grandfather. He obtained a sort of revelation in the wilderness. It was like the gods of various secret orders. Although it was marvelous, it wasn't unique in that era. However, it was different from those so-called gods who babbled on and on. Over the next few decades, that old man always wanted to use his own method to reinterpret this power, and he achieved a series of results. There were two main paths involved. One was closer to the revelation itself. It emphasized the difference between individuals, and it was formatting theory. The other was the path of fundamentalism that became narrower and narrower. Compromises were made, incorporating modern technological capabilities, reducing individual characteristics, and searching for the greatest common divisor. This was the theory of the archetype format. He Yuan listened quietly, not saying a word. You're very clear about the results. Formatting theory and the archetype format. Let's not talk about which is more impressive. In practical applications, formatting theory is without a doubt a crushing defeat. Of all the practitioners and experimental subjects who accepted this theory, the vast majority of them died. They all died from the uncontrolled growth of their soul strength. His grandfather, Luo Yuandao, is now a madman. His father, Luo Zhongheng, Oh, he's dead now. This person worked with Yen Hong for a period of time. According to what Yen Hong said, that person was simply a barrel of gunpowder that could explode at any time. That's not a description. It's the kind in the real sense. That's why not even his bones were left. Bai Xinyan was still supporting the back of her head, but her eyes were looking towards He Yueyin to see her reaction. He Yueyin also looked over. What's the conclusion? Isn't it just like that? Bai Xinyan's bright eyes blinked innocently. Chapter 266. In the eyes of capitalists, everything in the world could be squeezed out of profit. Even though Luo Nan appeared inexperienced and clumsy during the operation at Frost River Reality, even a fool could see the superplasticity of his abilities. For a large financial group like Quantum Corporation, even if they did not make a long-term investment, they could take out a few similar tools with short-term explosive power. These tools would be able to display unimaginable effects at critical moments. Unfortunately, Quantum Corporation had never paid any attention to Luo Nan. If not for Yen Yongguo's arrival, if not for Zhang Yingying's discerning eyes, Luo Nan would have been forever buried in the boundless sea of people until he turned into a barrel of gunpowder, exploding with a bang. He Yueyin absolutely did not believe that there was nothing fishy going on here. Then, in the end, what made Quantum Corporation give up on excavating this wealth? Bai Xinyan removed her hands from behind her head and stretched her waist. I'm just a researcher in a laboratory. What deep information could I possibly know? This is all I know. It's up to you to believe it or not. She displayed this attitude because she was certain that He Yueyin could not do anything to her right now. The transmission and exchange of information depended on her mood. She was willing to say this because she wanted to see He Yueyin's reaction. It would be a pleasant surprise if juice could be squeezed out from a sugarcane that had already been squeezed once. He Yueyin did not force her any further. She just sank into deep thought. The only thing that could make such an insatiable and greedy capital stop was either a terrifying and irresistible threat, or an incomparably enormous profit that could be enticed and harvested, or both. Following this direction, He Yueyin rearranged the information related to Quantum Corporation and formatting theory over the past few years. She tried to find clues, but it was hard to obtain an answer in a short amount of time. At this time, Bai Xinyan stared at her with a beaming smile. I've spent so much time talking to you. Shouldn't you answer my question? He Yueyin did not even raise her eyelids. She completely ignored her, but she did not directly refuse. Seeing this, Bai Xinyan bluntly said, although Ouyang Chen stole the limelight in the matter of Frost River Reality, I feel that what's more interesting is the deep involvement of the government and the military. Ability users are controlled in the cage of the logic world. The all-encompassing social consciousness, the unified political structure, the balanced intervention of the inner and outer worlds, and even the final fusion. It seems that this is the embodiment of someone's authoritarian governance theory? This series of questions actually pushed Luo Nan's ward a step further with regards to the question of whether or not He Yueyin's father would participate in the election. It reflected a high degree of concern towards the political situation of Xia City. It was extremely straightforward. Towards these questions, He Yueyin still remained silent. However, as long as she didn't refute him outright, Bai Xinyan had a pretty good idea of what was going on. She wanted to make some comments on this matter, but at this moment, He Yueyin's brows visibly furrowed. Soon after, Bai Xinyan also received the information through special channels. She fiddled with her wristband, letting the short text and information repeatedly appear in her eyes. It was just like the content of the wristband. It really is a consistent way of doing things. Just 10 minutes ago, across the ocean in Bay City, a heart illumination first oblatum of the Order of Justice had publicly killed the vice president of the Bay City branch of the Ability User Society due to a disagreement. This led to an intense conflict between the Order of Justice and the society. Similar incidents will probably happen one after another in the coming days. Bai Xinyan revealed a strange smile. Even if it won't be this serious, the tone has already been set. In a few days, every branch will be in a state of emergency. Naturally, headquarters will be hard-pressed. They will certainly make some moves. Your troubles have never been outside of the society. He Yueyin simply knocked on the car window in response to Bai Xinyan's comment. Stop the car. I'll take you. It'll save time. There's no need. He Yueyin pushed open the door and got off the car at a temporary stop. After standing still, She cast her gaze toward the building of Renai Hospital, which had been left behind to the point where she couldn't even see a trace. Over there, Luo Nan was still working hard for a more comfortable lifestyle. For a 15 or 16-year-old kid, there was nothing wrong with this. However, how long could this kind of peaceful and tranquil life last? Luo Nan didn't know that He Yuan was worried several kilometers away. Right now, his plan for freedom was progressing smoothly. With Bai Xinyan's cooperation, Xuelei used his own body to persuade his aunt. It was a reasonable matter. By the time visiting hours ended and Xuelei and his aunt left together, Luo Nan's trip to the Daoguan for practice was basically set. Luo Nan let out a long breath. His mind relaxed, and a deviation inevitably appeared. Because he was on guard against Bai Xinyan, and because he was a bit careful, Luo Nan never thought about telling others the secret of his external neuron. But he never expected that his concealment would actually cause He Yuan, Bai Xinyan, and even more people to make an extremely pessimistic judgment. He Yuan's attitude made him feel even more embarrassed. For a moment, he almost wanted to confess this secret. But at this time, he recalled the words that He Yuan had said not too long ago. Everyone should have a secret. Only they know. He still didn't completely understand the deeper meaning of her words. But judging from his reasoning, this was more trustworthy than the impulsiveness of his emotions. In the dead of night, no one would come to disturb him at this time. Luo Nan took a deep breath, contending with the choking cough that floated up once more. His mind was restrained, sinking into the depths of his brain. A bolt of lightning was roaming within the bright and dark region of his internal vision. This was the external neuron, the dynamo core that Jack and the others spoke of. Under the interaction of the mental plane and the material plane, a peculiar representation appeared. When his senses went a step deeper, a certain marvelous feeling of reality came back. There really was an enormous and tangible medium. It was like an enormous hole like the void, and it appeared within. The vast majority of the endlessly rising soul strength was drawn inside, separated by a layer. It was this buffer that allowed the surging torrent to turn into a vast and deep lake, avoiding a direct impact. This was the most life-saving function of the external neuron. Luo Nan called this function the hollow depository. It was by relying on this that he was able to endure the pressure of the rapidly rising soul strength to this day. But another week passed. No matter how much Bai Xinyan's cage therapy increased the consumption, this method of treating the symptoms was unable to restrain the steady and solid growth momentum of the soul strength. Even if it was the void hiding, it would not be able to hide it. More and more soul strength overflowed from within, forming a pressing and squeezing force against Luo Nan's fleshly body. Whether it was Bai Xinyan or He Yuan, these people's pessimistic judgments of Luo Nan's unbalanced state of body and soul originated from this. However, Luo Nan himself had a different feeling about this. The uncontrollable growth of soul strength was like a flood that overflowed in all directions. It was hard to control. But after filling the void of the deep hole, the rapid growth turned into a slow growth. From formless to tangible. Was this not a form of control? Could it be that it was impossible to take a step further? Chapter 267. The operation interface of the external neuron opened before Luo Nan's eyes. There were no other changes except for the icon of the visualization diagram. The gray and long download and install status showed some obvious changes. There was an additional ray of light above it, forming a long and narrow fan-shaped region of light. The ratio was about 1/10. It was much clearer than before. Luo Nan could sense that the specific ratio was a very mysterious number. This phenomenon appeared after the incident at Frost River Reality. The analysis progress was 7% before. It had jumped by nearly 3% overnight. The progress was quite fast. But what the hell was 2 decimal places? Luo Nan suspected that if he sought a higher precision, it would go all the way down to 9. There was a plateau in the progress of analysis? There was a level restriction? This was an unprecedented situation. Luo Nan had to seriously ponder over it. From Luo Nan's perspective, the application icon on the operation interface was a mapping of the external neuron's analytical controllability to a certain target. This point was fully reflected in gear and the human-faced arachnid. The current visualization diagram icon appeared from analyzing and controlling the human-faced arachnid. But as Luo Nan's understanding deepened, especially from the new understanding he gained that night at Frost River Reality, He realized that the essence of the human-faced arachnid was chaos and chaos. What was there to analyze? He would not be able to obtain any answers even if he wanted to analyze it. What could truly be analyzed, and what possessed the value of analysis, was the order frame that formed the outstanding instinct of the essence of chaos. So Luo Nan saw that the image of the human-faced arachnid did not appear on the operation interface. Instead, it was a visualization diagram. A combination of a tetrahedron, an inscribed sphere, and an outer scribed sphere. All right. Why was it this? Every time Luo Nan thought of this question, his heart would thump loudly. This thump lasted for an entire week. The corresponding relationship between the human-faced arachnid and the order frame complemented the crucial logical link of the operation interface's display and analysis target misalignment. Next, he just needed to use the simplest of reasoning to arrive at an inference. Among them, the visualization diagram overlapped with the order frame to a large extent. Could the overlap of the two be reflected in a practical sense? Every time a corresponding thought surfaced, the resonant resonance of the heavily chained crow in the depths of the boundless mental plane from that night in the logic world seemed to reappear in his ears. Between the various phenomena, between each detail, there seemed to be a thread that connected vaguely. Some were bright, some were dark, some were hidden, and some were visible. Luo Nan's thoughts suddenly froze when he found Bro Octopus's profile picture in his contact list. Mental state? A link that he had intentionally or unintentionally overlooked suddenly jumped into Luo Nan's train of thought. At this moment, a demonic voice floated back and forth within his heart. A schizophrenic lunatic. What was it made of? Was it because his research results were stolen? Was it because his father and son were betrayed? This had always been the reason Luo Nan believed in. But what if he looked at it from a different angle? From a perspective that he couldn't have imagined before, but right now, it was truly placed before his eyes? How could a creator not be a practitioner? How could the results of formatting theory not be used on his own body? Then if, and only if, this theory was ultimately unable to resolve the problem of the uncontrollable growth of soul strength. It was unable to resolve the problem of the imbalance between body and soul. It was not a perfect theory. Luo Nan used an objective attitude to make a hypothesis. Then what would his grandfather's state be like? It must be known that there was a 99% chance that there was not a single external neuron in his grandfather's body. What would be the result? This thought made Luo Nan's back suddenly explode with a layer of cold sweat. And at this moment, Luo Nan recalled his grandfather's crazy words back at the medical center. With his current understanding, it seemed that there was an extremely marvelous sense of correspondence when he analyzed and interpreted it anew. When this angle of thought became clear, his thoughts were like a flood that had opened the floodgates. They rumbled and surged forward, unable to be restrained. His grandfather's situation was set aside for now, but there was still that person. That person who had delivered the external neuron into Luo Nan's hands in an inexplicable manner. That person who could not be bypassed, who could not be cut apart. His methods, his objectives, his considerations, what would they be like? Chapter 268. Fire! Fire! Let the flames burn. Burn through this cloak of darkness. Cloak! Darkness! Luo Nan suddenly opened his eyes. He still wasn't quite used to the light here. He felt that the wall lamp was like a flame on the verge of being extinguished. It swayed restlessly under the cover of the darkness cloak. It was precisely the darkness cloak that pressed down on his body, isolating him from the outside world. It was like the sequela of a lack of oxygen. His entire body felt sluggish, unable to muster any energy. He understood that this feeling wasn't right. He put his feet down from the pedestal and his fingers tapped the ring-shaped chair on his body. The smart wall lamp's brightness began to increase, and warm rays of light sprinkled down. The unbalanced state of light and darkness twisted. The exquisite veins of the tree walls, the bookshelves, the wall decorations, and the shadows they cast. They formed a picture together with the extended staircase. This caused this narrow space of less than 3 square meters to stretch out and possess a marvelous sense of layering. Luo Nan felt much better. Right now he was in the treehouse of Withered Tree Sandbar. This was the private area that his parents had single-handedly built. This was the first time he had come to school after 2 weeks. The design of the day shift curriculum, the narrow social circle, and of course, the sick leave that Xie Junping had arranged for him. It was destined that the vast majority of people wouldn't know that such a student had quietly disappeared and quietly returned. After the end of the day's classes, Luo Nan arrived at Gear as the only official member of the ritual club. He arrived at the treehouse that was still unknown to everyone and quietly rested. Time had washed away his mother's aura in this place, but there were countless minute traces that manifested her past existence. Luo Nan had deliberately searched for her at first, but he felt that there was no need to do so after a moment. He just sat in the resting room on the lower level, leaning against the slightly bumpy decorations on the tree wall. He stared blankly. Countless things tangled in his mind, but none of them had any meaning. This continued until he fell into a deep sleep, when he was roused awake by the crazy ramblings of his grandfather in his memories. He had been tormented by those crazy ramblings for the past 2 days. He always wanted to analyze a hidden line of logic from them, but this kind of whimsical thinking was destined to hurt his nose. Even his brain was a bit numb. He looked at his wristband. Nearly 2 hours had passed in his days. It was also at this moment that the sound of a ladder was heard. It was a convenient tool that had just been installed at the end of the underwater corridor. It was used to enter and exit normally, and it was one of the results of Xie Juanping's work over the past half a month. Not long after, Xie Juanping, who had been in a meeting for half the afternoon, walked in. With one more person in the lounge, it immediately became especially crowded. He simply sat on the steps, yawning and crying, and asked casually, "What's wrong with you? Have you seen the video?" No. Only now did Luo Nan remember that Xie Juanping had sent him a video. Xie Juanping said that he had found the culprit who had snuck into the treehouse. However, it was a little different from what he had expected. "You said it was a magical mouse?" "It's a muskrat, not a rat." Xie Juanping gnashed his teeth as he corrected Luo Nan's misconceptions. It could be said that the brown-skinned mouse that he had fought with for nearly half a month was engraved in his heart. That thing is definitely not ordinary. It's impossible for a normal rodent to have that kind of reaction and behavior pattern. It must have mutated after eating some waste from some laboratory. Luo Nan was able to feel Xie Juanping's emotions. Xie Juanping's attention wasn't just on the body of a rodent. Today, Luo Nan arrived at Gear with a completely new appearance, shocking Luo Nan. He could roughly imagine how much effort Xie Juanping had put into planning for the past 2 weeks. Xie Juanping was the first person to treat Luo Nan like this, aside from his own family. Luo Nan had no intention of placing the reason within the framework of the format pyramid. He wasn't willing to speak dry words of thanks. He just silently remembered this favor and grinned. "I'll look at it later. I'll wait until I catch that mouse. Muskrat. Steam, braise, or stir-fry it up to you." Xie Juanping couldn't help imagining the beautiful scene of the brown-skinned mouse being tossed into a pot of oil. However, he soon sobered up and asked Luo Nan, "Aren't we going to that Daoguan? When are we leaving?" "It's about time. Right now." Luo Nan had already obtained his aunt's permission to learn breathing techniques, but it couldn't be said to have been finalized yet. According to what Shui Lei said, Gym Master Xiao would rather have nothing than a substandard disciple when it came to accepting disciples. Luo Nan had to make a trip and meet with him before he could make a final decision. According to Shui Lei, Gym Master Xiao's original words were, "Whether or not he can be taught, whether or not he can be taught, we'll talk when we meet." For this reason, Luo Nan and Shui Lei arranged a time to meet at the Divine Yu Gym. Xie Juanping volunteered to be Luo Nan's driver after hearing about this matter. Luo Nan wasn't at school for over half a month, but Xie Juanping and Shui Lei's friendship didn't break. Shui Lei's problems with his society had come to a standstill after the incident at the Limestone Water Village pub. Xie Juanping was the one who helped resolve it. Shui Lei's monstrous body and super strong martial strength made him an object of envy for Xie Juanping. He yearned for the Daoguan that Shui Lei spoke of, which had an amazing teacher. The sky was already dark by the time they emerged from the dense forest on the north bank. Xie Juanping was still driving the electric sightseeing car, speeding through the campus with Luo Nan. There were very few people on campus at this time. Most people had already returned home. Xie Juanping increased the speed of the sightseeing car to the highest speed allowed. At the same time, he spoke eloquently about the battle between him and the brown-skinned mouse. Luo Nan suddenly spoke without any warning as he controlled the submarine to pursue the mouse. "Slow down. Xie Junping instinctively hit the brakes when they arrived at an intersection. Thanks to this, a dark green heavy container that was incompatible with the atmosphere of the campus rumbled past on another road. The sealed container brushed past the front of the sightseeing car, bringing with it a strong gust of wind that blew the fallen leaves and caused the windshield to ring. F***ck me. Xie Junping had always been the one putting on airs on campus. When had he ever seen someone act unreasonably in front of him? Plus, what the hell was this heavy container? Acumen College implemented a strict system that prohibited external vehicles from entering. Even if there were all sorts of second-generation and government officials on campus, they would at most use a sightseeing car as a means of transportation. There were also special passageways for construction and transport vehicles. How could they just barge through the campus? The heavy container didn't stop. It sped all the way and soon entered a special underground passageway. But the situation just now was certainly a serious violation of the rules. As a candidate for vice president of the student council and a high-ranking member of the honor society, Xie Junping laughed mischievously. He called the campus security office as if it was a matter of course. He sent over the license plate, model number, and the image captured by the photon film. I guarantee that it won't leave the school gates. Xie Junping winked at Luo Nan. Of course, this little matter didn't count as anything. Soon, he and Luo Nan forgot about this matter. They rode the sightseeing car to the parking lot and switched to the phantom flying car. They sped all the way to the magnetic track and locked onto the coordinates of the River Wu district. They hadn't run far when a call came in. Xie Junping swept a glance and used the car phone to connect. He chuckled and said, "Old dude, what's up? You're free from worry. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."